your neck of the woods?
Oh, well, let's see how it goes. But it's a new morning, good day, good things in store, I'm sure.
Positive, I see.
Yes. Oh, well, most times.
Good morning, Jerry.
Good morning.
Welcome to Tuesday. I got here before you.
You're welcoming me to Tuesday.
Yes, I got here before you.
Okay.
Yeah, mine started a bit earlier. So what's new on your side?
Nothing much.
Tell us about the headlines.
Right. I am looking at the Standard, and the court shut down as cash crisis bites. Of course, there's been some austerity measures in the courts. And there's a picture here of an empty courtroom in Nakuru yesterday after judges adjourned their sittings due to lack of funding. So that's justice on trial, as the paper says. More than 15,000 cases suspended indefinitely across the country as the judiciary runs out of money for basic operations amid budget war with Treasury. So interesting one there. I wonder if some of the cases that have been suspended are the corruption cases. That would be really sad, wouldn't it?
Whatever case is being suspended, suspension of a case means something. That you're likely to find somebody who's in remand, who's going to stay in remand a bit longer.
Oh, right. How?
Because their case is actually not going on. So you find somebody who's actually seeking justice, who, has a case pending in court, and they're hoping they're going to go through the court process, and now that is actually also suspended.
Yeah, that's if it's a criminal case. Of course, there's a lot of land cases, civil court cases going on, so it's just a delay, really.
And even the land cases, it's still it's an inconvenience to somebody.
But of course, yes.
It's a big one there. What do you have, Ndu?
Well, the nation has announced that going gets tougher for Kenyans. The economy and everyone is hurting, from shopkeepers in Kisumu and importers in Mombasa to big manufacturers and investors on the Nairobi Securities Exchange. The story is the same. They are not feeling the much touted economic growth. So it's said that the economy is growing, but people in the country seem to be bearing the brunt of the opposite side of the story. Statistics paint a rosy picture of an economy that is growing. Many people are struggling to eke out a living. A 2-kilogram packet of maize flour now hits 135 shillings, the highest price in the last 3 years, making the cost of living the biggest pain point of an increasingly bad economy for the poor. So it's a big deal. Retailers and shopkeepers further away from major towns are now selling the same packet for as high as 140 shillings due to transport costs. And we're talking about being able to translate when you don't have development happening. This is now a clear example of how that works. When now you have food, and because of transport and production costs, you have to add on to the price. This is what you see when we see that we're not able to, transport costs, bad roads could lead to that, the cost of production could lead to that, and now here we see it translated, a very clear example of what is going on.
It gives a feeling like, you feel like the economy is stagnating, not even growing at all. And yet the World Bank had a function yesterday where they projected that Kenya's economy is going to grow by 5.6% this year.
Well, it's interesting.
It was just where they revised their outlook earlier. They had said 5.8. Now they're saying it's going to grow by 5.6. But still, 5.6 is a significant growth. But if you don't feel it, if all those things are happening on the ground, what ground if it will be different?
Well, inflation has fallen to its lowest point in the last 18 months, and it is well within the government's target of between 2.5 and 7.5%. Inflation is decreasing. Growth is increasing, but still, where's the gap?
Where is the money? What's this growth? Where is it? How do you feel it?
What exactly does the World Bank base these their projections
Studies on?
They base it on those statistics that they get, of course, from KNBS and their own projections, of looking at various sectors and seeing how the various sectors are performing. And then they say that because of the performance by the various sectors, agricultural, manufacturing, of course, financial and such, that now this is an indicator that in this year, the economy is going to grow by 5.6%. Remember, the highest we've ever gotten is what, 7.2 or something. So we've been doing an average of this 5-point-something% growth year on year. And the questions always come down to what the people feel. Do the people actually feel this growth? When food prices are this high, when businesses are shutting down, when you see lots of local retailers doing this? Is it an indication of actual growth?
Maybe I would ask the question, maybe there are sectors that are not growing, but some are. So, but these sectors which are growing, which are they? I'm not really sure. The problem with these reports is this: they sometimes offer a study in contradiction. Because on the one hand, you are being told you are growing. On the other hand, you are being told you are overborrowing.
Yep.
On the other hand, the reality on the ground, as we say it, is that everything is becoming not just expensive and affordable. So this growth, what form or shape is it?
It seems to be something that we can't quite touch, right? We can't quite see. Even with all the numbers that are being projected and even those that are being reported, it's clear that, really...
Maybe someone who understands this subject a little better could explain it to us. Because from a layman's perspective, the growth is invisible.
It is.
That's it. That's it. The growth is not really visible. But I also remember during the Kibaki years, it was the same thing. People were saying, the reports were indicating that we are really growing at that 7%. And I remember the then leader of opposition, Uhuru Kenyatta, asking, do people actually feel this growth on the ground?
Yes.
So the same questions that are being asked. Are you actually feeling this economic growth? Is it growing on to only one sector? Is it only benefiting a few people who feel the growth and then the rest of the population does not feel the growth?
Well,
the big questions.
It's time. This is what happens when you now stop being leader of the opposition and you're actually the
And
leader.
now the leader.
We will get to be asked the same question.
The same question.
Mm-hmm.
1 million people are sitting their KCPE exams amid flood threats. So the KCPEs are starting today. 6,440, the number of people who mark KCPE exam papers. The people who will be marking the exam papers are 6,000. More than 1 million pupils will this morning sit their KCPE exams. They, however, kick off amid fears of flooding in several parts of the country that are experiencing heavy downpour, including northern Kenya. PS for Education, Belio Kipsang, and the NEC Chief Executive Officer, Mercy Karogo, said all is set for the exams to kick off today. Dr. Kipsang saying the ministry is coordinating with that of Interior to have police helicopters on standby to deliver exam papers to areas that are impassable by road.
This isn't the first time this is happening.
Yeah.
We've had exam papers being transported even by helicopter. So
It happens every year.
It happens.
And it coincides. Should we move the date of these exams?
why don't we just move the rain?
Move the date of the exams. I mean, then you just have a whole mess that you don't want to
Maybe
deal
not.
with.
Just change your calendar, your academic year. Let it start in June or September. So you're having exams in May,
In
June.
May, kind of like what the British and other
Yeah.
systems do. Well, there's a reason why they actually have the school systems like that.
Because
Interestingly
this
enough,
time
they've
in
actually
December.
set the curriculum against the weather, kind of like when people would then go on holiday or then when the winter sets in and things like that. It's
Yeah.
interesting to look at how they've set their curriculum and how they go to school.
Please remember, we even turned around the times when we elect our leaders.
Yep. We moved our elections from December to August.
So that more people can vote.
So if that can, it's not it can't be done, it can.
It can be
can.
done.
Yes.
It can be done.
Conversations need to happen.
A report has been presented to the Senate. Documents tabled indicate that all the 5 ferries are actually death traps.
Okay, another report has been done. The report came out really quickly, but I think it was clear that was information that we could have been told, or rather that we could see. It was clear. So now what they will do with this report and what they will do as a result of having this information now on paper is now where the test is.
Yep, the action that's taken after this.
Yep.
And speaking of transport and safety, the Silverstone plane crash lands in Eldoret after losing tyre mid-air. That was yesterday, and this is the second one in 3 weeks. Silverstone, of course, being an airline, a small airline. It's an aircraft yesterday. Made an emergency landing at the Eldoret International Airport. One of its wheels, or tyres rather, dropped off mid-air. So the plane had 4 passengers and 5 crew, but landed safely. So very interesting and really querying their sort of safety record here. This is the second in 3 weeks in terms of
Mishaps.
near disasters.
On the front page of the Star, Mzee Moy in critical condition. The 95-year-old former head of state is on life support as his doctors fight to save his life. I think this is carried across all the other papers, but Star has taken it on the front page. He was admitted to the Nairobi Hospital intensive care unit 2 weeks after he was discharged from the same facility. Doctors in the hospital have told the Star that the 95-year-old former head of state was rushed to hospital on Thursday last week from his Cabinet Garden homes. It is something to do with his breathing system. He is experiencing difficulty in breathing, according to a doctor who sought not to be identified and told the Star what was ailing President Moi.
We wish him a quick recovery.
Well,
It's Tuesday, CT. The Financial Standard has your favorite story. It's actually given it a headline.
My
And
favorite story.
Yes.
Okay.
Who will save Kenyans now that the president is voting with banks on the rate cap? Who will save borrowers as Uhuru votes with banks on the rate cap? And then the other one is why Kenyans are angry with their banks. 50% have raised issues with banks because of customer service, where users found difficulties to get their issues resolved. 21% are saying functionality, consumers' concerns related to the performance of financial technologies such as mobile banking apps and websites, resulting to failed, delayed transactions. 10% have issues with charges, fees and expenses that are not clear. 7% are talking about blacklisting, complaints on being reported to the CRBs for defaulting on loans. So there, some of them are saying, well, I have not defaulted, and yet I find that I've been reported to the Credit Reference Bureau, and this is wrong. So people, that's a huge percentage of people who have issues with money, from money mysteriously disappearing from their accounts, hidden transaction charges, wrongful listing with Credit Reference Bureaus. Customers let rip about their frustrations in new report. All this in the Financial Standard today.
Well, you know, the what is for sure, if whatever the president had in mind when he decided to vote with those who want to remove the interest rate cap, if it isn't explained well, then we are talking about the same thing we've talked about, the inability of the government to actually put their cases forward in a way that is easily understood. All you know is the end product. He has signed it into law, or he has agreed. But the whys, it isn't a question of stating it, it's a question of explaining it. I'm sure there must be some logic behind it. But so long as that logic isn't understood clearly, then it will appear like the president has decided that he is encouraging the banks to do what they do best.
Indeed.
Yes, and that, unfortunately, doesn't look good.
Yeah.
Because then the question gets to be asked, what interest does the president have in banks? And we will come to the conclusion that his family owns a bank and has interests in others. So we will ask the question, so the president has put the interests of business ahead of the interests of the people he's representing.
Yeah.
And all these questions need not be asked if an adequate explanation is given for the decision. There must be a decision. I mean, there must be a good reason why he arrived at that decision.
There definitely is a good reason. In fact, his memorandum, remember, back to Parliament, had listed very many reasons why he thinks that this is the case should happen. But also there's the explanation. They should have gone and understood what is it that the people feel. Why does the public feel that the rate cap is important? And then come and address that and say, so we hear what the public is saying, and this is how we are going to allay your fears by doing this, and also still allowing the banks to do this because it has a benefit to the economy. If it has a benefit to the economy to let the interest rates not be capped, explain it to the people.
You see, the explanation about the interest rate caps doesn't make sense no matter which way you turn it or flip it, for the simple reason that our banks are not teetering on the verge of collapse. Our banks are swelling and almost bursting with profits.
Right.
Yes. So anything that allows them to make more money simply seems to say to the layman that you're allowing them to make more money than they're already making. And they are making a lot of money as it is.
Unfairly so.
Yes. If they were sort of like shaky and couldn't survive, that would make a lot of sense.
Oh, yes.
You want the banks to survive, but the opposite is true. So the question that is being asked is an extremely valid one. So why do you want to give them more money? Why? What is the reason?
Why do they deserve?
Yes, why do they deserve more money? Yes.
Questions that need to keep getting asked all the time. you know, on how the government also communicates with the people. This is it. This, you know what you're doing, but we don't know what you're doing and why you're doing so.
Why you're doing so.
Right. You have something to say, Jerry?
No, I'm just looking forward to talking about the exams and whether it's the right way to test students. Yep.
Now that we have 1 million students sitting exams.
Is this would this be KCP?
KCP. The standard 8s.
Yeah, that's 14-year-olds.
Yep.
Yep.
Starting now, this morning, that they'll be doing exams until Friday. Let's see what we have to discuss about that. Remember, you can download the Standard e-paper app from Google Play Store and Apple App Store, and with just one Standard subscription fee, you get to access all of Standard Group's publications. This include the Standard, the Mount Kenya Star, and also all the the other publications that come in, including the Financial Standard, today being Tuesday. Good morning. It's 18 minutes after 6.
Are you ready? Okay.
Spice FM. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice
Good
FM.
morning, this is Spice FM. This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation, broadcasting from Nairobi on 94.4. We are in Mombasa, 87.9, 102.5 in Kisumu, 96.0 in Nakuru, 96.7 in Eldoret, 90.9 in Nyeri, and Malindi, 97.7. We live stream every morning on Facebook, and this is Spice FM KE. We're also on YouTube, Spice FM KE, on our website, www.spicefm.co.ke, and our hashtag on Twitter is The Situation Room. Our Twitter handle is The Situation Room. 1 million people sit KCPE exams amid floods threat.
Right, it's a shame about the floods, of course, and perhaps we could discuss changing the dates around those. But very importantly, it's 1 million, I would say 13 to 15-year-olds, so 14-year-olds being the mean average, that will be sitting exams over the next, over the coming week. But are exams the best way to accurately and fairly test a student's knowledge? Some people have a very good memory, and so they're able to sort of regurgitate the information that they've taken in, but it's not to say that they fully understand what they've learned. I know a lot of the KCPE exam will be multiple choice, so you're not having to critically think, you're not having to analyze, compare and contrast too much. Some people get very nervous around exams, so it could be a particular day that they're having a bad day, and then this is a reflection of their sort of knowledge, or rather it's not a reflection of their knowledge as a result. So are exams the best way to test knowledge? I think not. Of course, a formal system needs to be in place, no doubt, so that we can measure and have a method that will fully compare the scope of the student's ability. But the fact remains, at the moment, this is all we have as a formal system. But given that children have different ability in terms of whether it's memory, whether it's understanding of something, I think we can widen the scope and perhaps introduce things like coursework, which is ongoing. But of course, this then gives the unfair advantage of you're able to do this at home with your parents, perhaps. And some people's parents, of course, might be more involved or more educated, more excited about it, and can give the unfair advantage. But I don't believe that exams are the best way to test a student's knowledge.
It's an interesting one. It is actually an interesting one. So are you proposing continuous assessment, like, like what you're calling coursework? So during the course of the term, you get assignments, you get to be assessed based on those assignments, and then it's computed at the end of the term.
Absolutely, because think about it, a student has a nervous wreck or a nervous sort of breakdown. I mean, I'm putting that mildly, or rather think of that mildly, not in the sort of real sense, but very nervous student. Of course, the build up towards the exam, the media plays a part in amplifying how important these exams are. Here we are talking about them, and we know when the results come out, the media again comes out, and there's this big sort of hula baloo. These are 14-year-olds who are going through other changes. These are adolescents that are sort of facing growth in different areas, sort of mentally, spiritually, and so it could just be a bad day. And why should that child be then judged for the rest of their lives? Because this then determines what high school you go to, in terms of what standard of high school you go to, whether it's national or
County.
County. And I was going to say provisional, but
No, county.
county is a district as well, and district. And this is because they had one bad day; they were a little bit nervous. It could also be that a student perhaps has, there's problems at home, and their ability to retain information is not as good as somebody else. And all this is going to go into one day, that one exam, and it's going to determine their future. So no, it's not the best way. And also for the country, we could be missing out on some of the best minds because of these exams. If they act as hurdles and we're not able to pick up the best students because of one reason or another, because the exams don't take into account these different factors I speak on. Of course, the factors are, millions in terms of the different things that could have gone wrong in the home. They could be violence in a home on that day. They could be, just a student feeling a bit down, a bit of bullying, which could affect their mood and so on. And that then determines the rest of their lives. So even we as a country could be missing out on some of the best talent because we sieve them out at this stage, don't we? They don't go to the best schools. They're not acknowledged at the best schools and so on.
Should we have students at any stage? I mean, not
Exams
students,
at any
exams at
stage.
any stage.
I think, this is my
Because you're talking about now the 14-year-old and this, what's going through this as a child. So how about Form 4? How about later?
Yes, no, there's got to be a way to sort of not just measure the students' knowledge, but of course sort of compare one another. It's a competitive environment we live in. I know in the English system for A-levels, you get a chance to retake your exam or resit it. So it's not just about putting pressure. It's showing that, well, actually, I do understand it. So, yes, I failed the first time. And what's wrong with a retake? And it counts for as much as the first time. So it's done modular. If you're doing biology, for instance, you'll have 6 modules and you take them throughout the year. So it's not at the end of, the sort of 4 years or the 2 years in A-levels. You take them throughout the year. And if you fail it, you can resit it. And if you can get an A, it means you're just as capable as a person who got an A the first time, because it is a different exam. You're not sitting exactly the same exam, but you have that opportunity to retake it. So maybe that's something we can introduce, the idea of retakes without penalizing the grade. But definitely continuous assessment is very important because this is now testing the child's ability to understand, to analyze, to comprehend, compare and contrast. It's not just a memory test. Remember, not everybody's memory is as good as the other. And is remembering things becoming obsolete at this day and age where you have information at your fingertips with the internet, with
you don't
mobile
need to burden
phones
your
and
brain.
so absolutely, you can release or free some of your your space, for you to deal with other things. Of course, we've got a teacher in the house, so I'm sure he'll
It's a mistaken view that the abilities that we have in learning at whatever stage that we go through stretches our abilities to the limit. It doesn't. We actually use a very small fraction of that ability. So the concept of freeing up space, it's good. It's good for conversation, but it doesn't.
Not practical.
No, it's not practical.
Does it
at
not
all.
work for you? If I can put some things to the side, so I don't have to remember certain things, my
No,
mind can then
you
work.
limit. You
So what
limit
happens to your mind?
You limit the capacity of your mind. The mind sometimes is likened to a muscle. Its capacity gets better and improves when you extend it and you expand it and you stretch it. It just
But
keeps
not
getting
with
better and better.
information. Not
Actually, with information.
With information.
Actually,
What else does the mind
actually with
contain,
information.
if not information?
No, in terms of there's no need to remember so many facts and figures. You can free your mind up for you to analyze, criticize, analytical
No,
thinking.
and I'm saying that argument doesn't hold water. Your mind can do a lot more than it does. It can have all that information. It can do all that analysis. The reason why your mind is limited is because you limit it. You don't give it the opportunity to actually do what it actually can.
I beg to differ, CT, because if I was focused on trying to remember a set of facts, my mind would be focused on that, as opposed to me actually trying to understand, what those facts then mean and what impact they might have in the world if it's, say, capital cities and so on. So as opposed to me remembering capital cities, what I want to know is, what is the GDP and how does that affect the people there? What is the culture there? Do you see what I mean? It's where your attention
No, I
is,
actually
where the
don't
focus.
see what you mean. Let me give you a simple example. There are some of us who in our primary school, it began early primary, you were compelled to learn the multiplication table. So you knew it. Now, how does that interfere with
No,
the process
that
of
gives
analysis?
you that's maths, and it gives you a foundation, because
No,
with
so
maths
be
you
clear.
build
What
build
do
on
you mean?
something.
That is information.
With maths
But
you
over
need
time,
the
you actually even
timetable as a
forget that table.
foundation.
You said
Well,
you
you
even
know
forget
it
that table.
inherently. I kind of know it innately.
If you know it
with maths.
innately, it means other information can also be absorbed and known innately. This is the point I'm trying to make. That's why I gave you that simple example of what the mind can actually do.
It's interesting because there have been studies and in terms of how much of the capacity of our brains that we actually use as human beings, in the sense that we're able to go much further than we actually can, and that we've been limited by the parameters that have been set, for example, by school, by university, by our other interactions. But that if we actually looked in depth in terms of what we have the capacity to take in with our minds, or what we have the capacity to think, imagine, create, innovate, etc., from the foundation of our minds, that we would actually be able to stun ourselves. And I think there have actually been movies that have been made, of course, that goes and steps right into the fictional. However, it comes off the premise and the study that the mind can actually do a lot more.
It
than
can, but I
than
believe there's a saturation point. For instance, I studied law. Now, we could take statute books into the exam room because it wasn't about remembering these hundreds of
It's about the
different acts. It's
application.
about its application. It's about its interpretation, and it's, as you say, its application to a certain scenario. Now, if we were focused trying to cram and remember all these statutes, your ability or capacity, cognitive capacity, to actually, apply this, I think would start to be limited, because your focus is in trying to cram these statutes, of which there's hundreds of. So you can say,
were there basics that were required to actually remember, to learn and remember?
in terms of law,
Yep.
yes, the case studies and so on. So
There you
common
go.
law. So yeah, you had to remember the case studies, what the judgments were, what sort of the principles of law were. But in terms of an actual statute, you didn't have to remember it. I mean, there's hundreds of
So
them. So
probably
there's an
bring it back
example.
to an exam on how they conduct the exam, because this started from that point of.
So maybe
do
they
you
should be
need
able
your
to take the
mind?
books to the books into the exam room.
Maybe that's why
so
they
it's
have
no
multiple
longer
choice.
Yeah, it's
It
no
leads
longer.
you into.
I find the multiple choice actually quite confusing. There was something we did here. Remember, was it
Yes.
maybe a month ago? And there was an exam paper in the newspaper, and they were asking about how we actually keep fish. What is the modern way of keeping fish? And the answers were so similar that it actually becomes confusing. Why are you trying to confuse a child?
No, it isn't confusing. If you have ever sat for an SAT or some of these exams, entry exams that they have for the US, you can read 10 questions and in your mind they seem to be the same.
Same
But they're not the same. They test different aspects of your understanding. That's what they're doing. It's the same question, yes, but it's not testing the same
No,
thing.
it's the answers that were very similar, not the questions. It's the answers that were very similar, the different options. I think you're given 4 options, A, B, C, and D.
Same
and they
thing.
were very similar. And I thought, are you out to try and trip
No.
up students?
No. A lot of understanding is based on what you're trained. How
What you are
trained
taught.
and what you're taught. And if a lot of the learning that you did was rote learning, then your capacity to analyze would be problematic. But if you're taught to analyze from an early age, then you understand the concept of stimulus response, meaning you have a situation and you are actually taught and trained. The discussion revolves around how you go about training people depending on the outcomes that you desire.
Interesting. Eric, you suggest that the multiple choice sort of jogs one's memory. Is that because I was talking about your ability to remember, or
you will look at
retention
them
capacity?
and then you'll be able to think. So the question is, for example, the one for fish. It's asking what's a modern way of preserving fish, right? So you look at them, and because you've been taught what is modern and what was being done before, then you start thinking. So are we smoking fish now? Are we salting fish now? Which of them actually
You
makes
seem
sense?
to have a pretty
right?
good memory, Eric, yourself.
So
And then the
you-
other one was canning, wasn't it?
Canning, yes. So you
Now,
start-
what
you
was
start to look
interesting
at-
with that one and how it could get confusing, and this is why a discussion is better than sort of the multiple choice ones. When they say canning, that's not the actual way in which you're preserving the fish, because there's something else in the can,
In the can.
whether it's brine, salt water, or sort of
Oil.
sunflower oil that's preserving it. Now, you don't get an opportunity to discuss that. Do you see what I mean? And to give your opinion with multiple choice. So I take issue there. But in terms of retention and sort of information, I think that's what these exams test, more than the child's ability to actually absorb the information, take it in, and use it, apply it, use it to analyze and have a perspective, have their opinion. Are you allowed to give your opinion in multiple choice? Of course not. See, now, once you take that away, you start taking away things like critical thinking as well. So I think we can actually
necessarily.
At
Not
that early
necessarily.
age.
Not necessarily.
City, maybe you can explain when you come out of this break. You can start explaining to us why exactly they do multiple choice at Standard 8. And then, of course, at Form 4, you don't have multiple choice exams. Now, that's where you start answering and actually doing in long form, answering in long form. You'll explain that to us. And as well as responding to what Jerry Thorne is saying this morning, that exams are not the best way
of measuring one's cognitive capacity, one's ability as a child, and one's potential as well.
And what are you suggesting?
I suggest maybe the idea of retakes to give that opportunity. It could just be a really bad day for a student and that messes up their whole life, but also continuous assessment. So the idea of coursework. So throughout the sort of maybe the last 2 years of high school, there's certain assessment, group work, testing different skills as well from, not just your ability to remember things, but also emotional intelligence and so on.
It's a very interesting debate that we're having this morning, and of course, we'll be opening up the phone lines in about 10 minutes. 0719 012 600. Good morning. 28 minutes to 7 o'clock.
Traffic.
All right, looking at our roads this morning and trying to get an idea of how things are going to be today. Right now, Mombasa Road, as early as 5:30, the traffic had started, and we already have complaints coming off there. It is Tuesday. We don't know what has changed today, but that is what we have with what we see right now. Coming off of Langata Road, also where there was this historic traffic jam yesterday. It's flowing smoothly right now, and that might change in just a short while. We'll wait and see what it looks like coming out. All right, jam has started to build up right at the Garden City Mall on your way to town. It's easy and flowing right after that, but we have to watch and see what happens with that as well. All right, coming down through Mbagathi Way is actually quite free, heading towards the T-Mall Junction and getting through to town. Apart from that, everything else seems to be smoothly flowing. Jogo Road is going just swiftly, heading all the way to the city centre through the City Stadium roundabout. Too many roundabouts in Nairobi. Anyway, so that's the traffic situation right now. Anything changes, and we'll let you know as it develops. It's still a bit early, but we'll let you know in about half an hour how things are looking and how you can plan your day. 0719 012 600. You see anything we should know about? Don't hesitate to give us a call.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Live streaming on Facebook, Spice FM KE, on YouTube, Spice FM KE, and also on our website, www.spicefm.co.ke. The conversation we're having this hour is around exams. 1 million people, standard 8 pupils are sitting KCPE around the country, and Jerry Thorne is asking, is this the best way to actually assess our students? Is this doing good for them? And she's proposing that we have introduced a system of continuous assessment and also, of course, allow retakes. Retakes actually do happen. So if you flop
and do you score exactly the same, or is there then a minimal or a maximum grade you can get?
It's treated the same way. So
All
you
right.
basically go back. You can go back to standard 7 or standard 8. Some schools, of course, will not take you back at standard 8. They'll tell you standard 8 is full, so go back
So
to
maybe
7.
the way in which we do it, so that it's modular, as opposed to having one huge exam at the end of the 8 years, you start doing a few exams here and there from sort of year 7
progressively.
And you can retake each one, because also you might have stronger subject areas even within the actual subject. But really, it's a test of test taking, isn't it, and confidence, because it's doing papers over paper after paper as practice. So what it tests is your ability to take tests. And I don't think it encourages
your ability to remember.
Your ability, of course, to memorize as well. I don't think it encourages the pursuit of knowledge, which of course is becoming increasingly important in today's world. So intellectual exploration is impeded because all you're doing is regurgitating information, especially when it's simply a multiple choice where you don't get the opportunity to even give your opinion. So
Actually, you do give your opinion. It's just that you don't explain it. But
You make
no,
a choice.
Your opinion might be your answer might not be one of the four. Actually,
it may not. So
yes.
you will approximate it to the closest, which means you are
which is
thinking.
limiting.
No.
Your
I'm
answer,
saying you don't
your
have to think
answer
at
based
all.
on your own interpretation, but
Yes.
from the point of view from the exam setter, the correct answer from their, for how they've set it is within those 4 or 5 or whatever is within there. If you interpret the answer to be different, then it's outside of those 4 choices, and that's where now you bring in things like consultation and creative thinking and critical thinking. That I may give a different answer based on my interpretation of things,
choice response
which then you're limited by.
are usually based on what they believe you were taught. So
Exactly.
yes.
Yeah.
So that's why I talked about it testing your memory. So it's a question of, do you remember what it is you were taught? And so the thinking process comes in when you're choosing and reading. You're making a choice.
Then
So
you apply yourself.
Then
to
you
the
apply
question.
yourself to the question and say, of these choices, the choice that is closest is this one.
It's this one.
Now, what has been found, remember, you may be working with a system that was evolved and put in place at a certain point in time when it met certain needs. And then the knowledge that was available at that point in time led one to believe that that system would best. Now, what Jerry is suggesting arises from the evolutionary process of learning that has taken place, and there's been the understanding that if you are actually going to test your students effectively, right from a very early age, you need to engage the entire brain. But again, remember, studies around the brain are usually neurological studies. And this issue of part of the brain being used, the 10% rule, as they say, this is something that came out in the 1890s. And there were 2 professors at Harvard, psychology professors at the University of Harvard University, who came up with this. That particular theory has since been debunked because other studies have come about, and they have come to the understanding, especially the study that actually formed the foundation of debunking this was from McGill University in Canada, and they came up with the understanding that your brain is actually occupied all the time.
Unless you're meditating.
Even then, it's occupied.
No, it's not.
Just at a lower stage. Again,
You're saying it switches off?
no,
Yeah, absolutely. You bring it-
But I'm talking about things that have been measured. Has that been measured, and has it been found that there's no activity?
Yeah.
The brain has no activity whatsoever when
Well, in
someone is
terms of
meditating.
activity, there's even, breathing, heartbeat. Your brain
No.
is involved in that. So
My question is a
involuntary
simple one.
activity.
You said there's no activity, and I'm challenging it, and I'm saying it doesn't. If there is evidence that indeed when people meditate, their brains completely go dead and they don't function, then I'll agree with you. But none. There is no such study. And I'm going by what has been studied.
CT.
So the discussion is a different one.
So let's go to the exams.
Yes.
What are your views on this? Do we actually need to do exams once? Like now, 3 days. So you've studied for 8 years, and these 3 days are going to determine your future.
No, we don't.
And is this division between ability of children, is it necessary?
Yes.
Do we have to understand?
Yes.
Why is it necessary?
It's necessary in every aspect of learning, because even if you think of communities or societies that have evolved their learning to understand the different abilities and capacities, it begins from the premise that we are different and that we have different abilities. Just a basic statement of fact.
So in setting one standardized test, does that test the children's different abilities?
No, it doesn't necessarily. But the question which was asked is, do we need to test abilities? And my answer to that was yes.
But
Because if you are going to understand the concept that people will fit into different parts or different aspects of society, again, the word difference keeps coming up as I'm describing this. Then how do you know that these differences arise, and how do you know the strengths that people have if you don't test these abilities? That's how you do it. So you know so-and-so is better at this, so-and-so is not so good at this, so-and-so is better
are
placed
you
here.
are
That's
you
what
able
do.
to pick up different competencies in terms of what the child's ability or where their ability lies through these examinations?
It starts with likelihood, really. Any exam can actually test any of those things. That's what you're testing. Any exam. Because a child who does well with rote learning, where you are required, you will see this child clearly remembers things well. There are children who analyze things well, because you will understand, they when you ask them a question, they don't respond. They're probably thinking through the question, asking, what exactly am I being asked? Now, these tests are not intended to test that. These tests are intended to test the memory of the child.
Is that important? Do we need that sort of retention, the ability to retain information
Yes.
at this day and age? We need that.
your capacity to retain information is very important because
Which is more important, your ability to actually utilize that
it is
information?
important to let me answer the first question before you ask the second one. If you understand that learning is intended to have an end product and it's called being placed in a workplace, then that memory is important. It's not a simulated situation like an exam where you're allowed to carry books. You are expected to perform, and your memory does count. Your memory is important. Your memory plays a greater role than anything else than your capacity to learn.
Even at this day and age where you have information at your fingertips?
Even in this day and age, because even as you read something, you have to memorize it before you can present it. Even as you read
Okay,
this
okay,
aloud.
you don't
I
have to
think-
memorize
I think
it.
Memory is important because if there's certain things that you did learn or you have to remember them, then you can then go and apply them. I don't think, however, that memory takes precedence over understanding
On the
and
application.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't take
We were
precedence over
discussing
that.
memory,
Yeah.
and I was explaining it. I started off by saying that if you consider, you need to test various aspects of the child. The memory has to be tested as well.
Yeah.
The capacity to understand and analyze has to be tested. What the memory does, it shows you the capacity to absorb and keep the information. Now, from that point of view, remember, this was against a background where we didn't have computers and we didn't have these artificial assistants that we have for learning. The learning tools that we had was a library where you went and read and you didn't walk around with it. So yes, when you look at the advancement, it becomes imperative to understand that indeed the process of learning has been made easier and the need to analyze. Remember, as you went higher in your education, you were introduced to analysis.
Why should you wait until you get higher and get older to be introduced
I've
to
actually
analysis?
explained the foundation on which this was based.
Mm-hmm.
When
So
you
does
asked
that
the
need to
question,
Because of
change
those
over
days.
time?
when you asked the question, I said, "Is this adequate?" My answer was a straight no.
It's interesting that you bring that up, Jerry, because just kind of in line with this, because I remember when going to school, kind of school that I went to, we would have what they would call a pop quiz, and that would be along the line of learning that the teacher, and a pop quiz was something that you were obviously not prepared for, but it was to test to see over time what the teacher had been teaching, if we had been understanding it and learning it. And then she or he would then be able to use the results from that pop quiz to test and say, okay, have I actually been going in the right
Am I
direction with
achieving
these
what I
guys?
should
Do
be?
we have some people who are kind of like falling off in terms of not, being in line with what it is that we have been teaching? I do see the importance of testing, but I think that testing has to be continuous. And I don't think that one exam is the telltale sign for whether these children have been able to learn, unless there are different things that are being taken into consideration over time. I don't think that one exam should now be the one that says whether you pass or fail. I think it should be an average taken over time of what it is that they've been able to showcase in terms of what has been taught.
Consider also that as you move higher with your educational pursuits, the amount of information introduced is more. And the understanding, not just regurgitating, but understanding and analyzing is then introduced because, as I said, with education, the further you go, the more information you start dealing with. Now, you asked the question, is memory important? I said, yes,
Absolutely.
it is. When you're beginning this process of learning at that early stage, there isn't that much information to actually remember. So you're introduced to it to give your brain the capacity to understand.
Start understanding.
Exactly. Now, as you go on, there are things that you will be required to remember, but others not necessarily.
necessarily.
It becomes
Because you
critical.
can always refer to some other sources to be able to get that. That is understood. And this happens as you go higher and higher and higher and higher. If you look at even the very concept of specialization, what do you think it is? It is precisely that. You segment it so that
You zone in on
yes,
one, right.
just zones in on one and is able to understand it. You may understand the broader concept, but you will then specialize in that one thing. And if you're talking about memory, of course it is important because in everyday discussions, even such as the one we have here, your memory has to come into play to discuss certain things. Now, if you want to talk about it in detail, like academic detail, then definitely not. You will have to make references.
So references will be becoming important at that point. So what you're discussing this morning is whether exams, one specific national exam is actually important or is enough, or should be the best way to assess the pupils. 1 million of them are starting their KCPEs today. Is that the best way to actually assess them? We'll now open up the phone lines 0719 012 600. Jerry Thorne is saying, no, let's start thinking of introducing continuous assessment so that you gauge them at the end of a learning period, not just with one exam. 0719 012 600. This is the Situation Room. It's a 6:45.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
And this is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. My name is Eric Latif. We have CT Muga, Nduoko, and Jerry Thorne. And Jerry Thorne has a proposition this morning.
Yes, with the exams coming up, we're looking at whether this is really the best way to test a child's understanding and ability, or whether we should actually change this and a child should have the opportunity to show themselves throughout the course of a year, because you can have bad days, you can have memory loss because of stress and what have you. Of course, it's also a lot of pressure. We know what KCP means in Kenya. We see media coverage. So you can imagine the sort of pressure it also puts on kids. So I would say, yes, it's a good test for memory, but in terms of testing a child's ability to analyze and also their creative skills, I don't think these exams give kids that platform, or indeed give us as the people who are assessing them that platform. So we might actually be missing out in terms of, because we use these exams to filter people through the system, and some go to the best schools as a result of their results. So we could be missing out on some of the best sort of talent and skill in the country because of the exams. And also, I don't think exams actually show if somebody has truly acquired certain knowledge, because they could just cram it and remember it for that exam, which I've done myself, and then forgotten it straight after.
You move on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's why I'm opening up the phone lines now, 0719 012 600, because we'd like you to join in the conversation. 0719 012 600. The conversation is also happening on our social media platforms. Spice FM KE, you can comment there, and our hashtag is the Situation Room, 0719 012 600. So Ndu, when you say that yes, you can see the importance of having continuous assessment, let's also look at the grading. At the end of it, so you're graded, and then some of them go to the best schools, some of them go to what everybody else will consider not the best schools. Is that the best way?
Well, I don't know necessarily, because nowadays how we do things, I think, has differed. It's not about your marks, but also for me, it should not just be that. I mean, you have somebody who got straight A's, and then their ability to, for example, make a presentation in front of a room, or to be able to dissect something and look at it piece by piece and then be able to share that information is at 0. But meanwhile, this person was a top of their class and they got all A's, but then other aspects they're not able to work through. So I'm not quite sure how the grading system has come about. I mean, I know that there are averages that are used, and then you can decipher then whether somebody gets an A or they've passed, or they did not pass or they failed. However, I really do think that a lot more needs to be taken into consideration when the grading is done, and that should actually contribute to the average. I remember going through school and then also getting to the university level, whereby your grades were an average of all that you did throughout the course of the term. It was not just based on one test. And I think that's the way we should look at it. The work that has been done over time. And then that work also encompasses different things. It's not just the exam, but the assignments that you have been given, the group presentations. Okay, they're probably looking at university level now, but the group presentations that were given. And then you have other systems of education where students actually come together and they sit together, and they're able to speak up, they're able to share ideas, they're able to do things together. That kind of assessment should also be done. But I think we think of assessment as sitting down where there's all silence and you're writing down questions to an exam, as opposed to looking at learning collectively. And I think that is how students should be graded, because then it takes in so much more. And somebody, I may not test well as an individual. I may not test well at all. I may know everything, but I freeze up during an exam, and that's just something about me. However, it doesn't mean I do not know the stuff. It does not mean that I've not been able to take it in. Which is why I'm saying that there should be other forms of assessment that should be taken into consideration, so that you really get what it is that this child can do. But something that I just thought about, I look at exams as well, and I say, here we are testing the students. But are we also taking into consideration whether then the information that was passed down from teacher to student is also what is being tested?
But when you test a child's information, you're testing it.
You're
of course.
testing also that.
But remember, the part of the reason why this exam is set in the manner that it's set is because the learning opportunities that students have in this country, there is also some massive differentials.
So this is an equalizer.
This is supposed to be an equalizer, but it actually isn't.
Isn't, yeah.
It probably mirrors the differentials even more. Because if you talk about students sitting for this very same, let's talk about this in an 8 exam. There are schools that actually understand that the different capacities of students. So you'll find each class has 2 teachers, some have 3 teachers.
Yes.
And the students are 15, the students are 20. And you're pitting this against as a class where there's 1 teacher and there's 60 students.
Yep.
Content that they're supposed to learn is the same. Already there is a glaring disparity. Then you're talking about just available resources on what they're taught. A child is learning in an urban setting where the school is in a multi-storied building with no farm, and yet there's agriculture being taught. You can learn agriculture even in a storied building, but you'll be limited. All I'm saying is that the entire system is actually based on a very uneven playing ground, just to begin. Now, this exam is the best attempt that one can have at bringing it closer. Now, how they try to bring about this equalization further is by a quota system, depending on the intake of the so-called national schools. So you'll find a child who comes from, say, an area that is already disadvantaged because either it's remote or it's barren or it's encumbered by floods. The minimum requirement for children in that particular area to national schools will be lower than that of children who come from areas that are known to have a greater advantage. So it isn't just one thing that is done. There are other steps that are taken to mitigate some of these uneven situations that may present themselves in the country. But then human beings being who they are and Kenyans being who they are will circumvent these circumstances.
Oh, yes, they do.
You will take your child from an urban setting,
Register them for an exam.
So that they can come out top.
rural-
Yes, they'll come up top in that rural area where the requirements
And
are
go to a
low,
national
so
school.
that they can get to a national school.
Tell me, let's talk about this grading system because I find that quite interesting. So you sit in your KCP, you sit what, 8 different subjects?
I'm not sure how many they're sitting actually. Yes, but
All right, you sit for your exams.
sit for
Okay, you
your
sit
exam.
for your exams, and then you get one figure, like you hear people
No,
say,
they
I got
tell you in
400.
this subject you got this, and this subject you got this,
10 out of 70,
and then it's
100.
averaged,
Yeah.
and
the mean average.
Yes, and then yes.
Now that mean average is what is then used to determine what school you go to, isn't it? That's
Yes.
what's used. Now, isn't that slightly unfair? Because what tends to happen is somebody could be very good at maths, but their English and maybe their history suffers. So as a result, you leave maybe mathematical geniuses out of the equation because
Yes.
they've been left out. Similarly, we could have our Mozarts in there, our artists and,
Yes.
cultural revolutionists and so on.
Yes.
And they get filtered out by the system because maybe they weren't particularly good at maths or science.
Once again, yes.
Now, how do we mitigate for that?
You get to Form 1, and then you get to Form 4, and the same situation is repeated again.
So we could be missing out on a lot of talent, and we could also be shortchanging a lot of students with
Yep.
talent.
Our entire system isn't geared towards filtering out talent.
It is.
It isn't.
Or in terms of capturing talent, rather. It's not geared to capture the talent.
Yes, I'm using the word filter deliberately, and I'm stating the way I'm stating it deliberately. Because, for instance, if you look at how it is they determine your entry into the university, they are a little more specific. It's not just a question of the grade, but even the marks come into play. So you got an A, but what marks? Did you get 80 or did you get 90?
Yeah.
Which is fine, but I'm trying to say some students are already very sort of strong in certain subjects.
Certain areas.
And
than
yes,
others.
absolutely. So you get somebody who's a literary genius, but because they're not mathematically gifted, their mean grade goes down, and as a result, they don't go to the top schools. They don't have the best
The current system
opportunities.
that has been fought is the strongest effort I've seen in trying to rectify what we're
The
discussing.
new one, the
here.
CBC.
The new one, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
It's an attempt to rectify this.
We're talking about competence based.
Yes, and this is what you're talking about, because it's setting out to understand that, okay, look, we just can't determine someone's entire life with one exam, for heaven's sake. Okay. Let's see what they do over the years. And when you have this continuous assessment, it means the things that require rectifying and sorting out can be rectified at the stages where they are noticed. You don't wait 8 years to try and sort it out with an exam. And the exam doesn't sort out the problem, really. So, yes, it is an imperfect system, but let's ask the other question that we're not asking. People who have come out of this system, how have they fared in the workplace for which they were being prepared?
Which people?
844.
Those that performed well, or those that didn't perform well?
No.
Anybody who went through the
Everybody
system.
went through the
Everybody.
system. How have they fared? That's the question.
What
that
are we
I need to-
comparing them to? Do we have something to compare them to other than people that perhaps went to GCSE?
Those ones are
schools?
few.
Mhm.
Those
So
ones
what are we
actually few.
comparing these 844
To
system people
themselves?
to?
Because
How they're performing in life.
yes, and in the workplace. Let's say, for instance, someone who was in the 844 system, do they qualify to go to university? When they come to the workplace, do they fit in? Are they able to do what they're supposed to do?
They would, because everybody else is from the system now, isn't it?
No.
So they would fit in. It's an institution, so to speak.
No,
So they would fit in.
no, not necessarily. If you go by the complaints you hear from employers, it is not the same.
Or in terms of, they don't come out with the
Capacity,
skills.
understanding.
Even things like, even if you want to get granular, things like making a presentation, for example, or putting together research to then form that presentation even before you wanted to make the presentation. Things like that are not academic in nature, or things like that don't test you. But now that you have to actually think and here we go. The critical thinking and application then of knowledge becomes a challenge then later on in life outside of the school setting, because they don't have now the crossover from the information that they have received or been able to impute over time to then now apply that knowledge in a work setting, in a real life situation. So the jump from practice, the jump from theory to practice then is wanting, because they're not really able to do it. And we're talking about above average in terms of numbers of people in the workplace, and it's actually been documented that this actually has been a problem later on.
Yes, but here is the clincher, really, and an accolade to the human brain. If they are provided with an environment in which they can learn these new skills, they learn very quickly.
And that's why you have a lot of people then later on in life doing what? Going back to school.
Yes.
Yeah. To do a bridging course, for example, or to do a diploma in something else, so that it helps them to be able to
specialize
gain
in
those
areas.
skills and specialize in areas where they are challenged because of what they did not get earlier on in their education. Yeah. And that's what we see.
The phone lines are open 0719-012-600. We'd like you to join in this conversation. Jerry Thorne is saying this morning that exams are not necessarily the best way of assessing the capacity of our pupils. 1 million of them are starting their KCPE exams this morning, and we're asking, is that the best thing that we should be doing? Well, we know that CBC is coming up, and CBC, of course, is going to change a number of things, but it's still the issue of exam at some stage. Is that the best way to assess the capacity of our pupils? Just to respond to the question that you asked, Jerry, how many are they sitting? How many subjects are they sitting? So they're starting with math and English, and then there'll be science, Kiswahili, and then they finish with social studies and religious education. So those are six subjects.
So what of the artists? What happens to our Van Goghs as Kenyans?
That's it.
What happens to artists? Let's put it this way. The sort of system we have allows you to perhaps do that when you get to secondary school.
In the initial stages of 844, it was testing all those things. Arts and craft was an examinable subject.
Because what if that
in
is your
KCPE?
strength?
Because that's it.
You've got a creative mind. That is your strength. Why are we limiting that in terms of when we're testing people? We're not giving people an opportunity to showcase their strengths.
People who are gifted with their hands as opposed to their minds. 0719-012-600. This is the Situation Room. Good morning. It's 7 o'clock.
Spice up your life. Traffic.
Okay, it's a bit foggy in Thika town, and that is actually coming out onto the Thika superhighway. The fog continues, and people trying to get out of that inbound and outbound of the CBD. So be careful as you're coming down there. Traffic, Nairobi bound traffic from Matasia, Ngong, roadworks going on Ngong Road as well as Karen. So it's busy and it's moving slowly, but it is moving all the same. Traffic on Wayaki Way, a lot of vehicle traffic on the road now getting down towards the CBD as well. We're looking at Mombasa Road also quite thick this morning. Kiambu Road, however, is super smooth heading towards the Thika Superhighway as well. So that's what we see, and nothing too crazy at the moment. If you do see anything, do let us know. Don't forget the 0719012600 is the number to call, and let us know if you see something out of the ordinary. We'll give you more updates as we go along.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have Jerry Thorne, lawyer, political strategist, an insider in the corridors of power, ready to take on any side of the debate with her signature eloquence and grit. C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room. The only way to start your
2.5
day.
minutes after 7 o'clock. Good morning, and how are you doing? This is The Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We broadcast on 94.4 in Nairobi. We're in Mombasa on 87.9. We're in Kisumu on 102.5. Nakuru 96.0. 96.7 in Eldoret, Nyeri 90.9, and Malindi 97.7. Also, we are live streaming on Facebook, Spice FM KE. We are on our website, www.spicefm.co.ke, and also on our YouTube channel, that is Spice FM KE. The conversation happens on Twitter as well. Hashtag The Situation Room, our Twitter handle, Spice FM KE. Please follow us. We're opening up the phone lines 0719 012600. Because the conversation we're having this morning is around the exams. So we know that Standard 8 pupils are beginning their examinations this morning, and they'll sit them until Friday. And of course, we know that KCSE had started a bit earlier and is still ongoing. It'll be concluding in a couple of days' time as well. And what we're asking this morning, what Jerry Thorne is actually saying this morning, is that exams are not the best way to assess the capacity of students, especially when you have this one national exam that is the only determinant of how you progress in your schooling career, in your academic career. So what's the best way? Have continuous assessment?
I think exams, it's quite difficult to get away from them because a formal system needs to be in place. But we've looked at the sort of hurdles that students might come across on the day of the exam. They might be anxious on that day and not perform, or their performance not be reflective of their ability. And then again, we talk about the fact that it's a memory test. So in terms of your ability to analyze and your creative skills, that's not tested, which could be some people's strength. And do we really need to retain this information, given that it's the information age, we have information at our fingertips? Of what good is it for me to know that the capital of Burkina Faso is that one? Yeah, absolutely. Unless I then understand, it would be more important for me to then know maybe what the population is, know a little bit more about the culture, a little bit more about the history. That information for me, I find, is more important when it comes to maybe comparing and contrasting and understanding African states and so on, as opposed to just knowing facts and remembering facts, which is what these exams tend to do. There's a lot of regurgitation that you're doing. It's more of a memory test.
But at that
which I feel
that early stage, Jerry, don't you think it's important to give these children information, because these are basic learning. So you're given this information so that when you get to the point of, like CT was saying, as you advance, you get into deeper understanding and deeper
It becomes
critical
quite
thinking.
difficult to rewire
Then you start
somebody's
remembering
mind.
that, there's a country called Burkina Faso. It's in West Africa. It has a capital called Ouagadougou, and this is what they do. This is they speak this language. This is their culture. So if you actually advance into studying, people, anthropology and whatever, then you have a basic understanding
You have a basis.
You have the basis.
It's not an
for
understanding;
that.
it's the knowledge that you get at this stage. But I would argue the other way, that I think at sort of when your mind is forming at a younger age. I'm not an educational specialist, but I would argue that it's more important that you teach your mind how to think critically and how to analyze at a younger age, because that then becomes the way your mind is wired, and you can always then fill it in with information. So you actually set the mind, you create the framework, so to speak, and then you can fill it with information. If you teach that regurgitation, memory, and so on is what's important, it becomes very difficult to then try and teach people how to analyze, how to think critically. Because I think even in Kenya, in your first year of university, one of the courses you do is critical thinking. Now, it's very hard to teach critical thinking because it's a way of doing things. So you can't then come in, and if you've never, the whole system hasn't been about critical thinking, and teach somebody this is how you think critically.
No.
The idea is that you thinking critically is the way you think.
The incapacity is in the teachers, not the
Well,
process.
that too. But I think the process is flawed, especially because of this idea of exam taking. Because again, it becomes a test of your ability to take exams. Also, some people are very good at cramming. So it's not really a show of their understanding and grasp of their subject. So we could actually be putting, doctors in places they shouldn't be, because they're able to cram things.
But medicine, you need to cram.
No, you do need to
Oh,
remember
that
a lot of
you
stuff.
definitely need to
There's some
cram.
information
There's
that we
no
know.
question about it.
There's some information we
You
don't need
have
to
time to
forget.
refer to a book. You
No.
need to know and act.
On the
You
go,
have
on
to
your
cram.
toes.
No, not always. In medicine, I've been to a doctor who's actually looked up something and gone into his books. You don't need to cram. Of course, it's required given the way the system is set up in terms of learning medicine. But your ability to remember things it's not reflective of your ability to understand, to analyze, to apply. No. It's not.
You're stating this as though these functions are distinctly separate and
No,
distinctly alienated.
there's
They're
an
not.
overlay.
They all
Don't get me
work
wrong.
together
There's,
at
to
the
a certain
same
extent.
time.
To a certain extent.
And
but
even when you talk about people memorizing, it may not be at the fore, but they are analyzing. We always analyze.
not necessarily. I've crammed things where I don't necessarily need to understand it. I've crammed them and remembered it
Yes.
using
Just
those
to pass an exam.
acronyms.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Didn't
Without
understand it.
understanding. And I didn't need to understand
cows
it. And I
eat
did
grass.
very well. All cows eat grass. What was that?
What was it? Was it music?
It's the bass
Every
clef.
good boy
There's the
deserves
bass clef.
food.
Yeah, and then the treble clef was every good boy deserves food.
Right.
Right, exactly. So I mean, you
Wi-
still remember
without
things like that till
understanding.
day.
Mm.
Right, yeah.
And so it's not really a reflection on a child's talent.
Let me explain something very simply.
Mm.
The process of understanding involves analysis, whether you know it or not. Just the simple process of understanding.
I mean, at a different level. There's
No.
levels of analysis.
Don't differentiate the levels.
Why not?
I'm talking about the fundamental.
Why not state that they can be differentiated? I'm just stating that.
No. I'm the one who's stating they can be differentiated, but they function as a unit. That's what I'm saying. You can't demarcate it as separate entities that function separately. And I'm saying
don't get me
that
wrong,
the process, and I've said the process of understanding, just understanding, involves analysis.
Not the
Basic.
level of analysis that you can get if you focused on analysis alone.
But
and
that one you have to be
application
taught
alone.
now.
Now, if you start teaching somebody from a young age, it becomes part and parcel of their thinking. It becomes their perspective. The lens through which they see most things will be analytical, as opposed to them just regurgitating facts. Of course, there's no better alternative, to be honest, in terms of what we have at the moment. So, and I have said exams are they're crucial. I'm not saying we write them all off altogether, but we could be leaving out students that maybe they don't have a good memory, but they're brilliant thinkers, brilliant analysts, strategists, and we could be leaving them out of the system because their memory isn't great.
So let's
And
review
that's
how
what
we
this
grade
exam-
them. Let's review how we assess them and how we are grading them.
The
So we can
grading
have a way
system
of
as well.
knowing.
The grading system as well, I think, is very flawed. We've talked about it, that you get a mean average of all your subjects. So that doesn't give certain individuals, maybe who fall into the creative type, who would draw. And just before we went into the break, you said something really interesting where you said, they work with their hands and not their minds, which I think is a bit offensive for those, for artists.
They work with their hands.
I think that the creative mind and being able to showcase it is not given a platform in these exams. So what you find is, first of all, art, you're not given that opportunity. So you could be a great artist, but you wouldn't go to a good school because you couldn't do maths.
Should we have national schools that also cater for such? So yes, you have
Absolutely.
a national school.
Why shouldn't you?
100%,
National school
You
for academically gifted, national school for art gifted.
I mean, we have music and art schools all
music-
over the world.
music
that
national
people
school.
do, and so that you're specialized in areas like that. Absolutely, I think such a thing is a necessity in this day and time, where you say, well, okay, if this is where you've seen that people are gifted and talented in a particular area, then there should be a place where they then should be able to go and hone those skills. I mean, we have medical schools, we have law school, we have other things, and this is something that people have been able to go out and make out a living, until they remembered for generations after that they've been able to do so successfally. And
Most
this
people
is about their
who
mind
try
also.
to
It's
make
not
a
just their
living
hands.
through the arts suffer. Many of them die poor.
That's true. It's
In the
something
past.
that-
I think
no,
that's changing.
Even in the
in
present.
Kenya today, that's yes.
No,
you see that.
the
They
world
still don't get
over.
opportunity unless you
The
get
No,
opportunity.
no,
Like,
Well, I
it's
think
not what it was.
By the time you
the
become famous and you're making
appreciation,
money, no.
But that's
I think
also
that was
because
the
the
It's the
appreciation
opportunities.
for such has also increased over time, and I think that's
Yep.
something we have to accept. Before, it was not. The appreciation of the arts as something that you could make as a career for yourself was not appreciated in many different parts of the world. I mean, I shudder to think what I've told my father if I was going to go and say, look, I want to paint, and he would say
Paint what?
he would have an aneurysm.
I wasn't disagreeing with that. The point
Right.
I was trying to make, I wanted to get your attention, was this.
But I mean,
People-
but now if I went and told my mother I was going to do something like that, she would say, okay, yeah, actually,
Now,
it's
if you went
something
to
that
tell
you
her,
could
she
do.
wouldn't have much choice. You're an adult.
If I was a
That's
child
true.
in this day and time, if
Yes.
I was a child now, and I would have told my parents that, they would have understood and gone with
Yes.
it, as opposed to years ago when there was really no appreciation that this is something that somebody could live on and be recognized globally for.
The arts have always been important and an integral part of every community or society. Remember, the education systems that communities, governments adopt are supposed to help meet the aspirations that they have.
And the needs, yeah.
So, arts, music, those things go to the very bottom of that particular food chain.
In fact, they were deemed as jokers.
Yes. Now, that is wrong.
Very wrong. Yeah.
That is wrong. But we need to understand that even as you seek to introduce some of these new things, it has to be embedded in the understanding of what the aspirations of that particular country is, because that's what the education represents.
I think with the world and where we're going in innovation, it's crucial that we give everybody a chance. There's a lot of talent that we're missing out because the curriculum is so restrictive. But the question I also wanted to bring into the discussion is the sort of pressure that we're putting on 14-year-olds. Is it necessary?
At this stage.
Is it necessary? Can it have, because we've seen suicides, following the results and so on. And should the media play the part that they do in amplifying these exams, because they do make a big deal about them? You see a lot of, sort
cover
of,
those-
a lot of
those who
coverage.
excelled.
You see policemen, driving around with
Jerry,
guns.
Jerry, they've always been policemen.
Why is
It
that?
didn't start yesterday. They've
Why?
always been policemen.
No, I'm not saying it
because-
started yesterday. I'm just
No,
wondering as
it's
to
the
whether
way
it's
you've highlighted
necessary.
the presence
Guarding
of the policemen.
exams.
Yes, exactly. They've always been
As
there.
I do that, let me just still remind the people the number to call 0719-012-600 to join into this conversation, because it's a big national conversation. It's actually not just happening against the backdrop of what's currently happening today. This is the beginning of KCPE. It's happening against the backdrop of what we've been discussing as a country all along, and even changing our education system into CBC, the curriculum-based, competency-based curriculum. People have even said this in Parliament before. I remember Jeremiah Kioni, the MP, had at one point even said, let's scrap the standard 8 exams and let's have those continuous assessment, and let a student be guaranteed of entry into Form 1. We've seen these exams being, a way of just sieving off pupils. So you have 1 million of them who are sitting KCPE, and then you'll have 300,000 of them who go into Form 1. 700,000 are not going to get spaces into Form 1. So what happens to those? what are you doing to those people? And are you telling them that you are complete failures? Because it's what the society has been saying. And Jerry is actually raising this issue of, should also the media, step back and stop amplifying these exams so much, because we are piling pressure onto a 14-year-old.
Yeah, and you'll see this, okay, we're talking about it, so maybe we're adding to it as well, but you'll see this especially when the results are coming out, and, all media houses, this is what they're reporting. And I understand the exams are significant, but I think the media further, exacerbates the situation when it comes to the pressure. And you do see suicides. These are 14-year-olds. Do we need to put them under this pressure? Do we need to be testing them in this way?
I say no.
How many
Is it
suicides
necessary?
have we had resulting from?
We shouldn't have any. One is
How
too
many
many.
have we had?
I don't know, but I've seen enough to think
And
this is
was
not
there evidence
necessary.
that they were related to
Yes,
the exam?
yes.
They say they leave a note.
Absolutely, they leave a note,
And how many
or they
have
tell
left
their
these notes?
parents. Well, one is one too many.
There's a point I'm trying to make.
Mm-hmm.
Suicides, by their very nature, are not always what you think it
They're
is.
symptomatic of other
Okay,
things.
well,
Yes.
nothing is always
Yes,
what you
true.
think it is.
No,
that
no,
could
no,
be
no.
argued with
Rain is
anything.
symptomatic of water. There's no alternative to it. If it's raining, it's water. It doesn't rain anything else.
It rains acid rain, my dear. I mean, we could go into it and
Yes, we
and
can.
sort of
I'm
go into
simply
semantics.
saying
These are
that-
students who have killed themselves because of the
No.
pressure of exams,
you
and they
are-
have stated so
You
categorically.
brought
question
in
would be,
suicide
but
as
for the
something
exam,
negative for the exam,
no,
and I'm rebutting it,
it's
telling
there.
you, do not
It
use
is-
that as an example
No,
because it's a poor
Well,
example.
No, it's not a poor example.
It
It's there.
pushes
But
CT.
but for this exam, that student would not have committed suicide. That is the
acts
test,
as a
the but
trigger
for test.
for whatever
It's
else that
unnecessary
this
pressure.
child is going through.
These are
this exam
adolescents.
is
They're
a
very
trigger.
vulnerable.
Did the lady who drowned recently drown because her car had faulty brakes, or was it because the ferry was operating under substandard conditions that it shouldn't be in? Which is which?
We don't know yet.
Precisely.
Could be both.
Precisely. That is what I'm trying to
Could be
say.
both.
That even with the exams, you cannot definitively point out and say the exam led to this. No. Because
Okay,
someone
this,
left a note.
This student has left a note. The way to look at it, CT, is to say, but for the exam.
No. I've told you
Would-
how I look at it.
Okay,
so
now
I do
I'm
not need
explaining
to
how
tell
you
me
would look at
how
it
to
if
look
you
at
were
it.
reasoning in logic and law. You would say, but for the exam, would this student have killed themselves? It's called the but for test. If that exam didn't exist and that pressure didn't exist, would the student have killed themselves?
We don't
Now,
know.
if you carry out that test, if the exam didn't exist, the student didn't kill themselves before the exam.
All right,
it's
so
the
look
exam.
at the case, the most recent
The-
case that we had of suicide when this young girl, and it was reported about 2 months ago, a few months ago, to the end of last year, she had around the same time when they were taking these exams. Now, she got her results in January, as they normally do, January, February. And
by end December they have their results.
right
now, yeah.
around that time, December, January, she got her results, and I think we actually reported this case. She had all A's save for 1B. All were A's, 1B. And she did kill herself and left a note, and actually did not talk about the fact that she didn't do well. But she said that in the note, she knew that her father was going to be extremely disappointed in her because she did not get all A's. And this is the reason why she took her life. So now, when we look at that, the pressure that's being put, this pressure, is it coming from the exams, or is the pressure coming from the expectation of how well a student is going to do from their parents, from everybody around,
It's a
with the whole
combination of all
well-wisher,
that.
with all the well-wisher syndrome that we see, how it was that we expected to do well, and if you
Those
don't.
are semantics in terms
be a
of it's the
combination of all
exam
those
that is
things.
putting
It's the
pressure.
exam.
Even the parents are then putting pressure because of the exams. Should 14-year-olds be facing this pressure?
And the
Is it
child-
necessary?
And the child is actually doing that because, I mean, she's sitting in that exam room knowing I've got to ace this. I've got to ace this. My father expects that I ace this. I've got to get all A's. And they come out and they're still, crossing their fingers until the education CS announces results. And you're like, oh, God, I didn't get all A's.
Because for the longest as a nation, I think we were sort of driven by the fact that education, or so much of your life was pegged on education. How you performed at school was then going to determine how you performed, sort of in your career and the rest of your life. I think that still might be the case, but you do find situations where people didn't do too too well at school, but they come out and they're able to carve a career in the arts or start their own business. You find a lot of people who've been, they didn't do too well at school and they started their own business. They're now employers. So they're not even looking to rise up the career ladder. And if we begin to understand this, maybe we can release some of the pressure from students achieving such high grades in exams.
Well, I think also education was a means to an end, and education was so that you would eventually, get a job, really, or enter into the job market. But I think we need to look at it differently. That education is actually a platform for learning and trying to get in as much information as you can, then that you can use to apply to a job. You can apply that to family life. You can apply that to relationships. You can apply that to your being as a citizen in a country. You can apply it to life in general, and not just towards passing an exam, which doesn't really test your full capacity for knowledge.
The conversation continues on our social media platforms. Hashtag the Situation Room on Spice FM KE Twitter handle, and also on our Facebook page where we are live streaming. This is Spice FM KE. The conversation continues. Our number 0719 012 600. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. It's 20 minutes after 7 o'clock.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
94.4 Mombasa, 87.9
Mornings
103.5
done right. 94.4
96.0
Spice FM, Nairobi.
90.9 in Nyeri and 97.7 in Malindi. We live stream every morning on www.spicefm.co.ke and on Facebook, Spice FM KE. We've been talking about our examinations. Are exams the best way to actually assess the capacity of our students? And now let's get further beyond this and see, once the people have actually gone and passed, and they've advanced, they've gone to high school, they've gone to university, they've passed, they've come out with distinction and honors, do they get the jobs?
We're looking at a situation where very many students don't get the jobs. Recently, the BBC did a story on Kenyan ghostwriters doing lazy Western students' work. And we are looking at $1 billion worth of academic writing, which is the estimate globally, annually, for the kind of money that comes out of academic writing. We've also looked at Kenya being the country with the highest output on the continent of work that is being done for Western students. And primarily, we're looking at the United Kingdom and the United States. Ghostwriting university essays for students who don't have the time or the desire to do them can be very lucrative. We look at students earning upwards of $100 in a day when they're actually able to sit down and do the work for a lot of these students. Now, many say that this constitutes cheating, and that Kenyan students, or actually, Kenyan job seekers, are writing papers or writing academic papers for UK students and US students, but this actually constitutes cheating. In Kenya, it is not against the law, and we see that very, very many students are actually writing these academic papers, and the minimum they get is what, $20 per assignment, which is 2,000 shillings, and heading upwards. And like I said, it's $1 billion shillings every year that they're able to get out of this industry. However, the question now is that people are saying this is cheating. In Kenya, it's not being seen as cheating. And I'm saying that if it's knowledge that's being exported, and if people are able to eke out a living for themselves in an environment where they would not ordinarily get a job, then why should we stop it? I don't think we should. And I think that it's something that they can go ahead and do. This is one opportunity that we have to export knowledge from this country. And we see that it has been actually gaining results. So here we are saying it's cheating on one hand. I don't think it's cheating, and it's actually not going against the law here in Kenya. But we should actually look at the fact that, yes, in some cases, we should actually be earning more for the work that they're doing in this sector.
Nduoko is saying that we should formalize cheating.
Oh, you see, this is the thing now.
I knew. I just wanted to get you. So yes. So you're saying that but you're saying we should formalize this. We should acknowledge that this is something that we are doing. We are exporting our talent. We are exporting people who have knowledge. We are exporting our knowledge. People are seeking these services, and why not just formalize it and institutionalize it?
Well, you'd be surprised at the number of people that we have sit in a cyber cafe or sitting in their homes behind a laptop, and they're actually working and they're earning money every day. But what they happen to be doing is that they're writing, especially at the master's and PhD level. And these are people who have not done a master's or a PhD either, but they're putting together this information, they're putting together the content, and they're writing these papers upon which students in the UK and the US will actually go then and pass a course and then enter into the job market and get these lucrative jobs. But the core of their work was done on the other side of the world.
What's the complaint exactly?
The complaint is that, it's interestingly enough, it's coming out of the UK specifically, when a report that was done by the Daily Mail, that this constitutes cheating, and that Kenyan workers are actually contributing to this, despite the fact that they've also labeled UK and US students as lazy and not wanting to do their own work, and are actually looking and, are either too lazy, don't have the time, don't have the desire to do it for themselves. But that here we are, and African students have been able to, or even just people who are looking for work, have been able to see the gap and have been able to pick up on that and are actually doing the work. But that everybody is contributing to this, whereby we say
two words spring to mind: creativity, opportunity.
What about the ethical aspect in terms of course, opportunity for money making, but in terms of you're getting involved in something that is criminal in the West? So there's a few, in terms of law,
why is it
quite
criminal?
a few. In the West, it's criminalized.
Why?
It's fraud, it's lying, it's cheating.
Shouldn't they change
It's fraudulent.
No, why? I'm just asking, why is it fraudulent?
It's considered sort of misrepresentation as well of the South. But if you imagine that you're lying, that you've got certain qualifications and you're put in a position that's maybe quite sensitive or delicate, so maybe as a doctor and you haven't actually sat the exam, you can see how that's dangerous for society, and you can see why the law has had to criminalize it. The fact that we're then getting involved in that, international law comes into play, because of course it's cross-border. If it's not illegal here, but we're aiding and abetting something that is illegal there, it's something that needs to be looked into. It's, of course, new crimes come up as technology advances, new crimes come up, and this is probably one of them. I think ethically, you are aiding and abetting something that is criminal, and you can see, I've given an example of some of the repercussions in society, where you have doctors who are not qualified treating people. You can see how dangerous that is.
But what exam is this that is being written by a Kenyan for
not
a medical student?
They're actually not exams. What they
It's
are is that they're
papers.
research papers that are being
And they
done.
constitute a percentage of the
grade,
overall.
of the overall
Exactly.
grade. Okay, so, and interestingly enough,
And
this
what
has,
percentage is it?
well, I don't know, but in a lot of what I've
It
seen,
never
like in the US,
constitutes
it's
the
about
bulk.
30. It's about 30 to 40%.
So the other 70, these students actually have to do on their own.
Not necessarily. It might not be an exam. It might be group work. It might be
Yes.
a lab thing.
Yes.
So it's.
Yes.
I think what percentage of it is immaterial, because
Why
this
is
is
it
work,
immaterial?
because that it could be that 1% that was needed on the day of the surgery that person needed to have known, and they
You know,
didn't
you're
know.
focusing on medicine
Because I
only.
think it's a good example.
It
I
is a
think
terrible
I
example
want to show you the
because it's the one
repercussions
example.
of this practice.
How
The
on earth
the
would you
repercussions
be
of-
able to write a paper for a doctor if you don't understand medicine? How?
No, maybe you do understand in terms of you've done the research and so on. How on earth are they writing PhD papers? They themselves don't
You
have
cannot
PhD
become
papers.
a doctor because of term papers. The bulk of your work you do is practical, and you can't be
But they are
represented
term
by somebody.
papers. But they
Yes.
are term
The
papers.
point I am making
There's
is this.
coursework in medicine. You
There is.
hand in reports
There
and so
is,
on.
but-
And if that's been done by somebody else, it could have dire consequences.
In
So you're
this
saying that
country-
the actual student
giving
in,
an example
the actual
of what
student
the
in
repercussions
America
could be.
has actually not studied what they're presenting.
Absolutely.
So they didn't do the research themselves. That
Absolutely.
means they have not internalized what they have
They don't
presented.
know,
They
yes.
don't know what they've
And they
presented.
can go
Eric,
out there and
Eric.
put
Yes,
to
they
practice
studied
and
for
be
the
asked
4 or
to
7 years in school, but they
Eric, we don't know whether they studied. You see, this is the thing.
No, we're
this
giving an
argument-
example. This is an example. It's a hypothetical example of how this practice could actually be detrimental.
It is an example, but medicine is a terrible example.
It's the
to
best
give.
example because
Worst.
it's about saving lives. You could lose
Worst.
lives because
So
of
what's
this
your
practice.
best example?
I
Siti?
don't have a best example.
Then let's use this one.
No,
Because
we can't because the process of becoming a doctor in this country requires a year of internship. You don't-
After your
theory, whatever.
right.
Which you could do, and
Yep.
you could do. But if you've
don't-
actually
Okay, so what you're saying, CT, essentially, is that this term paper or this research paper that they do is inconsequential to the
Yes.
overall
Yes.
in terms of their practice.
Yes.
And it really doesn't matter in
If it
terms of
didn't matter,
how
why are
their
they spending
practice
money?
would be.
That is why that's what I am saying. It's a requirement.
But it
Weird.
matters to the course. They're
It
graded.
does.
They're graded
It
on
matters, but it's not what's going to make you pass.
Why
So
are
it's-
they
this is
buying?
not. This is
Necessarily.
not going
Why
to be
are
the
they
straw that
buying?
would
Why are
break
they-
the camel's
why are they
back.
paying
per
someone
se.
to do their work?
it is part of what is
The
going to
argument
make
I
you
am
pass.
putting forward is this. I brought in the word creativity and opportunity. Why is it that someone cannot write something for me if I do not want it written? That's the question I am
Sorry?
asking.
If you don't want
Say-
to write it,
Yes. You see, Eric was asserting that
Then
That
you
they've been-
actually say that it has been written for me. Don't then present it as your work. You actually say, I didn't feel like, you tell the teacher. Because why are you in school? Why are you at university if you don't want to have to do the research and the work?
Then
You can't
why-
say, why can't somebody do it for me because I didn't feel like.
say
Then
I-
tell the
I-
teacher, I didn't feel
so
like
let's
doing
take
it.
this
so I
argument
had
to its logical conclusion. So if I want to talk about myself, then I should write the story myself and I shouldn't have somebody write it
No,
for me.
ghostwrite is completely different. I'm talking about academic papers. A ghostwrite is completely different in terms of you can have somebody, maybe you have a very interesting story and you'd like to tell it and you want to tell it in first person, and you can get a ghostwriter because that person writes very
And
well.
they're good at writing.
That's completely different. But to do exam papers or to do certain papers, when I say exams, sorry, coursework papers, and hand them in as though they were yours, I've given an example where it could actually lead to, the loss of lives.
as we continue the conversation, I think it's clear that actually Kenya now has been known and is being known more as a hub where you can get writers.
We've got
who will
bright
be
people
able,
here.
who will be able to do this academic research and work for you. Last year, a couple of years ago, the government actually founded what is known today as the Ajira portal, and this was specifically for online work. Now, the online work has gone beyond just little bits of information, and it has graduated to this which we're seeing now until the world has actually taken notice. So it's a conversation that is happening right now here and abroad.
Should we formalize it?
We
Should we
could
actually
do
just
and
make it just
regulate
for-
it and actually create an industry out of it, because as you say, ghost workers, it's not illegal. What it is
Ghost writers.
ghost.
That would be city council and the Sonko.
Ghost workers are illegal, Jerry, in
ghost
Kenya.
writers.
We're paying people who don't exist. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. It's 7:30. Let's take a look at traffic.
Traffic.
Now we know why there is some issue around Wayaki Way. There's a snarl up around Safaricom headquarters as schools are collecting exams at the deputy county offices. So there's quite a lot of traffic there, and until they get the exam papers out, that is going to be the situation. All right, that's where we have the traffic there. After that, though, it's not so bad getting into the city center. Moving off Mombasa Road, there is traffic. It's bumper to bumper. It is the time. You would expect it right about now. Thika Road, you're moving right around Safari Park, so it's going to be a while before you get anywhere close to the city center. All right, not so bad around other parts of the city, although Langata Road is piling up right now, and we have the same situation on Gong Road. Around the city of Nairobi, it is traffic hour, as we like to call it, and this is what you expect to see regardless of where you are, really, unless of course you woke up at 4 o'clock. Definitely you'll be where you wanted to go by now. Let us know what traffic looks like around the country as well. Send us a message, give us a call, 0719 012 600.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings Done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
27 minutes to 8 o'clock. Good morning and thank you for joining Kenya's biggest conversation. This is the Situation Room on Spice FM 94.4 in Nairobi. In Malindi, we're on 97.7. Nyeri, 90.9, 96.7 in Eldoret. Nakuru, 96.0, 102.5 in Kisumu, and 87.9 in Mombasa. Of course, we live stream on Facebook, Spice FM KE, on our website, www.spicefm.co.ke. Our telephone lines for you to join the conversation, 0719 012 600. This morning, we are talking about academic writing. So Kenyans are well known, well regarded, highly sought after globally for what we are actually very good at. And this is academic writing.
It's interesting to know also that just another fact is that, we're looking at charges between $25 and $100 per paper. And we're looking at a 25-page paper at best. And it'd be interesting to hear just what the charges come through.
50.
It pays well, more than other jobs I can imagine. If I get out there and start looking for jobs, I might be given a job that is 30K. Well, I can sit in my house doing academic writing and get up to 60 or 50K.
There are people who are actually building houses through academic writing. Some of them have a number of accounts, someone like having 5 to 10 accounts. And each of those accounts gives them about $2,000 every.
When we talk about job creation, this is it.
Hold on, $2,000 every 2 weeks from 5 accounts.
Absolutely.
So that's 1 million shillings, let's say, every 2 weeks. That's
They're
2 million
they're
shillings
building
a
houses.
month.
Yes, it actually happens. And what they do in these cases...
This isn't bad.
This what you want to take it up for something that 10 minutes ago.
No. I mean,
But this is what people are doing now, and they're actually spending money to buy the accounts, because then you have lucrative accounts, and if you buy an account, that's where you
what
find
is an account? Explain this.
Account basically it's a platform upon which you have people who need this work done, and that's where they basically go to sit and see who can write for them. Now, all of that information is on that account, and for you to have access to such an account, you're basically guaranteed.
So there's a middleman now.
You're guaranteed work. And,
so
but
there's
I mean,
a
you have
middleman in all of this.
There are platforms, and interesting enough, these platforms are actually created in the US and in the UK.
But
and
it's actually illegal in the US and the UK.
Well, in the institutions, but these websites upon which you go through and buy an account are actually legal entities. Now, they don't have control over who enters onto their platforms. It's kind of like you have a job seeker and a job poster. Now, the job posters in most cases are the students who are looking for work to be done. Now, the platform or the website itself claims not to have any kind of control over who comes and posts a job. If somebody posts a job, the website gets a percentage of whatever it is that is paid out. Of course, the person who does the work gets bulk of the amount. However, so you have the platform, which is the website, which is operated out of the UK or out of the US. And then you have kind of like your worker bees. In this case, a lot of Kenyans, and then you have the people who are posting jobs, and those are who the students are. They are the ones who are posting the jobs. So now you'd spend like $30-40 to buy an account, and that account gives you access to all of these jobs, and you have people making millions of shillings.
People are making
so
good
the question
cash.
is why, and you have one person who was an engineering student, a graduate of the University of Nairobi, is not able to get a job, but here can make 4 million shillings a month. Why not?
4 now.
0719 012 600. Philip calling in from Thika Road. Good morning, Philip.
Morning, Eric.
Welcome to the Situation Room. We're talking about academic writing.
Thank you. Yeah. I just had a brief contribution, and it has to do with a complaint from the UK and the US. I actually had the opportunity to see it while I think it was reported about 2 months ago. Or
2 months ago, and then a week ago again, yeah.
Yeah. For me, I think the root of their complaint is not the cheating. I think they are concerned with how much money is leaving the economy.
I think it's significant. It's significant enough for them to feel the impact as an economy?
I think so. I think it is. If it's $1 billion,
it's $1 billion global industry.
Yes, they would be concerned because not much paid by Europe to Africa at the tune of $1 billion, and anything else that's paid for that much, we have to put a lot of input into it. That's the farm produce, which costs a lot. They regulate it, and I think even in this case, the worst would be to regulate.
So we're as Africans, we're siphoning money out of the West. How good does that sound?
sounds like a reversal of roles.
Poetic
I
justice.
think that's their main concern, and I think if we try to regulate it, then we would deny a lot. We would deny a lot of young people the opportunity to make money while they are waiting for formal employment, which we all know is short in finding. I have an example of my little brother who makes a lot of money from this, and
Really?
we couldn't find him a job. Yeah, we couldn't. Nobody. He's never been employed formally in Kenya for I think 4 years now since he graduated with a first class.
Wow.
So, and I know people who employed people who do online writing. They have so much work they can't do it themselves.
Right.
So I don't think that regulating it would be the death knell for it. And
What about the legal perspective, whereby because this is now criminal in England, you're aiding and abetting a crime, although of course there's the cross-border issue.
So it's not a crime in Kenya. And even Kenya, when we want somebody to help us in another country to enforce or rather extradite a criminal, it has to be a crime in their
They have to come
Right,
and
absolutely. Okay.
Thank you very
It's not
much.
a crime
Philip.
in Kenya yet.
Yeah, it's not a crime in Kenya, and we shouldn't make it a crime. If we start regulating, then we'll make it a
Then
crime.
we'll,
No, but I think we've even had
Philip-
a government
Philip, thank you
portal
very
that
much.
has been established.
I have Johnson also calling in from Nairobi. Good morning, Johnson.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I'd like to also pitch in into this discussion.
Yes.
I think it's like the caller said, when we try and regulate it, I think we'll put a lot of guys out of work. Yeah, because it's kind of an industry whereby these young guys who are coming out of university are getting a chance to actually, quote unquote, get experience and also get some cash on their own. Yeah.
So how about just formalizing it so that you have more platforms? Now, these platforms are created in Kenya. You can create a company in Kenya. You create an account in Kenya, and this is legal in Kenya. So you just formalize it, and it becomes a proper avenue for people to actually get jobs.
Yeah, that can work, but now you come in with areas whereby now you get taxation in and all that. You see now, now guys now will now get away from the platform.
Pesa yako inaenda.
Pesa yako inaenda. You see now people now will start now getting away from the platform now.
Okay.
Would be interesting.
Because you have a situation whereby the platform is getting a percentage of your money, and then also there's a KRA who's also coming in and getting also a percentage of your money.
Okay.
Yeah, which doesn't really make sense for the overall work. Yeah.
If you're getting 4 million, you don't think you should be paying taxes?
Oh, really? Jerry, if you're given an option of getting 4 million
and not paying taxes,
and not paying taxes, and getting 2 million and paying taxes, which one would you pick?
No, absolutely no. You're right. Yeah, you have a point.
Yeah.
Johnson, thank you very much for calling.
Okay, thank you.
What about what's interesting is the ethical perspective, whether we Kenyans feel like we're participating in a scam.
No, I mean, you've gotten people at the point whereby they've looked for jobs, people have gone hungry, and then here you have this
Free
opportunity
market economy.
where they've asked you that all you need to do is have a laptop, internet connection, and you can do it in a little box in your house, as opposed to the years when you had to count coins to buy milk.
So you're helping
now
this
they're
person
not-
cheat,
they're- no,
but
they're
it
not
doesn't strike a moral chord. It
thought-
doesn't sit.
Look
That
at
thought
it this
does
way,
not
Jerry.
cross people's
You're
minds.
helping this
It's a
person
job.
do their research. Now it's upon
Which is
them.
cheating in that country.
It's upon them to actually review the work that you've sent to them. It's upon them to review
Okay,
what
yes.
you've done.
I suppose you could rationalize it that
brought
way.
the
It isn't
information to them.
rationalizing. You are actually not cheating. You're
You're aiding and abetting
No,
a
you are
crime.
not.
It's been declared
No,
a crime
no,
somewhere else.
you are not.
And you will see the UK will have enough leverage with the deals we have in terms of maybe donor aid and so on to force us to make this a crime. If it's becoming something that's big and significant enough for the BBC to picks up as a campaign, people start talking about it, institutions chip in, and you'll find institutions who are trying to avoid people from doing this or
Jerry,
to avoid this, you'll find Kenya will be put under
the
pressure to criminalize
the
this
BBC
practice.
started talking about Boko Haram 10 years ago. They still exist. Not much has changed. I'm trying to get to this point. There are situations where you have crime being committed because what we're discussing here is happening in country and it goes against the laws of that country. In the US, we had a scandal that involved university entrances. It later became known as Operation Varsity Blues. Now, there was a company that got, from around 2011, 2019, they got something like $25 million because they went about ensuring that they played around with the requirements, knowing the requirements of Ivy League universities, the top-notch universities. Parents would pay, and it was their duty to make sure that they ensured these students got entrance. The entrance involved them bribing university officials.
Yeah, quite a few famous people as well.
Yes, it involved them fabricating information. Now that's a crime.
That's a crime.
Because it is in country, the country's laws and regulations are clear about it, and these gentlemen or these people clearly, flagrantly went against these laws. These ones of ours do not.
No, it's currently not illegal, but it could soon be criminalized.
It's not illegal in Kenya?
It is not.
It's not illegal.
The government
0719
and I'll tell you about that after you
012
take that call about how it's not illegal according to our government. Have you heard about the Ajira platform? It is a platform that was established by the government to allow people to do online work.
Yes.
So
2 years ago.
Let's hear from Daniel, who's calling from Kisumu. Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning, people.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to mention what the lady has mentioned about Ajira Digital.
Yeah.
Yes. When I finished my university in 2016, I enrolled to that digital program.
On Ajira, yeah.
Well, yes, where we were taught on how to do online writing with those various sites. And actually, it pays a lot compared to us waiting to be, given work
or employed.
Yes. So the issue of making it illegal or legal, no.
Can I ask you something? Can I ask you something? On average, when you started this work, when you registered on the Ajira digital platform, how much average per month do you think that somebody would be able to get? When we're looking at what an entry-level job is in Kenya, how much would you be able to get from this platform? Say on a good average month.
Around 35 or 40,000 a month.
And this is a month, and you're sitting at home, right?
Yes.
And this is gross or net? This is after tax or before?
We don't pay tax on Ajira.
There are no tax.
Ajira doesn't do tax.
There you go. And it's a government.
And this is government.
Yes.
Okay, Daniel.
Best of both worlds.
Knowledge is power, Eric.
What am I doing here?
So you can't be complaining that the government isn't creating opportunities.
Norman, how are you?
Hello, Norman.
Hello, good morning, panel.
Good morning.
Yeah, the topic of today is very interesting. Because the first time I learned about online writing is when I saw it change someone's life.
Paying somebody's life. Change, okay.
Yes. Yeah, it changed someone's life. And when we joined year one, we had a clique of friends whom we were just in the same level. Tulikuwa tu mahaslas pamoja. But when they entered or joined the online writing or academic writing as they called it, waliingia kwa ligi ingine, and their life changed so much. And I would I don't see a situation whereby someone who is notorious for academic writing, in as much as the US or the UK may take it as illegal. I don't see a situation whereby an online writer will be taken to US for prosecution like the Akasha family.
There's no extradition.
Yeah. So let us just do it as long as we can. It can help us make money.
We continue.
Yeah, we do it.
Thank you, Norman. Wainaina, good morning.
Morning, Eric and the gang.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Wainaina.
Good morning. The gang greets you.
The gang is saluted.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, good morning.
I wanted to make a few comments. I think the line we are pushing is very wrong. Not everything is a matter of law. This is an ethical issue.
Absolutely.
Now, today, the US and the UK are trying to address the issue in their country. For us, we should also look at it as tomorrow. These same people who are doing the academic writing will be writing for our own students. And if this thing happens locally, who will then write tomorrow? If we don't train our own students to write and they are being written for, will they be able to do this job tomorrow?
Is it sustainable, is what you mean?
It's not sustainable. There are small benefits today, but the cost tomorrow, even to our own country, may be higher. So we have to look at it not just from the legal perspective.
When you talk
but
about
it's
the
a very
ethical,
honest question.
when you talk about the ethical angle, what do you feel is unethical?
What is unethical is that you are doing some work for somebody, knowing that that person will misrepresent that fact. And tomorrow we'll have our own students being done work for. So would you be happy if your own kid or son was written for all these things and then you know they didn't do it?
But we already have situations where academic cheating has been reported in this country,
and we're trying to fight it.
And we've been fighting it. In fact, two gentlemen have been, government officials have been at the fore of this. One, Professor Magoa and one Matiang'i, they were at the forefront of this. So it's something we had in this country. So when you're saying it could affect us, we actually have seen the effects of this cheating in the country.
Exactly, City. And that's why I would want you to push the same argument there, that this thing is wrong. It's not about the small money people are making in the short term.
It's a lot of money.
4 million.
I have to say, Wainaina, it's not a small money. It's a lot of money. People are building homes. People have actually lifted themselves out of poverty because of this. People have then been able to support their families. We're talking about serious money.
We're
talking about what people have been. And we have to look at that. We really have to look at that. That people are actually able to make 10,000 shillings a day.
It's the same country where people are making billions through corruption. It's not just about money. It's not about them.
It's about doing what's right.
What's right, exactly.
Wainaina, to the best of your knowledge, do you think this is happening internally as well? Are there people in our universities and schools who are using local academic writers?
By the way, I happen to work in a university, and I know this is very prevalent.
It's already
just
happening.
Like in the West, it's already happening.
And what is the university doing to curb this, to address this?
Oh, I don't think there is much going on because also our universities are not funded.
Okay.
So they are so much interested in graduating students and making money from students.
Wainaina, thank you very much for your call this morning. 0719-012-600. Thank you for your calls. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation, 10 minutes to 8 o'clock.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah!
You're listening to Spice FM. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
0719-012-600. Academic writing. Wainaina has raised that issue of ethics, and you are raising the same thing.
It's unethical. And of course, it's plagiarism in the West. There's a lot also. It could be obtaining services and money by false pretenses. It could fall into quite a few criminal definitions in the West. Now, what we're doing here is aiding and abetting. Of course, on the flip side, we're looking at the economic gain, the fact that this is creating opportunities. So you weigh it out, and if you say it's creating opportunities and you rationalize it that way, that's one way to go. But do we then now just take any opportunities available, irrespective or irregardless of sort of the ethical considerations? That's the question.
You were going to explain the Ajira platform.
Well, really what happens is that I think initially it was a way to regularize the amounts of young people who actually, and not even, interestingly, not just young people who are out of a job or didn't have something to, or wanted to do something extra with their time. And so the government actually at some point in 2016-17 realized that there were quite a number, there's a large percentage of people online working every day, and they're actually making some money. And then of course came the call that how are we going to make sure that we're getting the maximum that we can out of this. And so interestingly, some of these platforms upon which we'd go and get some of this work to be done now were brought together and put on the Ajira platform. And it's actually called Ajira Digital. And on this then, you got a combination of things, so that now you're looking for work technologically, and you're looking for work and you're able to do it digitally. And then some of these opportunities, if you were to log onto the Nigeria platform now, some of these opportunities are there, and it's saying X number of jobs available at this time. What kind of work are you looking for? So it was the government to say that even in this, we are able to provide work in this arena. Now, that doesn't mean that the government is aware of every single job that is available, but they just know that now these platforms then will be available in one place and one time. It doesn't mean that everybody who is working online goes to the Nigeria platform. It just means that now the government has an arm where it has come together and has put collective jobs that are available online that people can go and access.
Those are jobs. Is academic writing specifically on the Nigeria platform?
No, that's what I'm saying. It's online jobs. Now, when you click on an online job and then you go into it further, that is when you get to know whether it is an. And it could be, and you've got to understand that they're very. When you browse through, you can get to see that it could be, and there are many things that you could do. You could do a voiceover and get some money. You could do ad writing and get some money. You could do put together a marketing campaign, put together a presentation, and then you can see that somebody's looking for a thesis to be written, kind of thing. It's listed.
It's one thing. It's one thing for the government to turn a blind eye to this practice here in Kenya, given the sort of economic situation and lack of opportunities, but to actually, further promote it and enhance it by creating a platform. This is the government, by creating a platform. And it's not just a legal versus ethical question. There's also relations with other countries. Why would we be in a position where we're sort of propagating and we're
Sounds
actually
to me
helping
like the government
fuel?
is not aware of this.
No,
this science.
the government is aware. But
why are we
you're
helping fuel?
If you're talking of relations, we've had a case that has been in the public domain in this country for a long time. It involved a minister who was Minister of Energy
and a former
CEO of the largest energy company in this country. And what is it? They took money to a tax haven that is under the British.
Jersey, right?
Hasn't interfered with our relationship with that country
Whatsoever.
in any way.
We're going through the extradition process slowly by slowly. The wheels of
Because
justice.
there's an extradition treaty with regards to that, but because it's illegal in both countries, it's
it isn't illegal.
The law here. No, what they did.
Isn't.
We're talking about the guys who stole money and
the
stashed it
stealing
in
was
Jersey.
illegal. The taking money out of the country in this country,
but there's an
it is not
extradition
illegal.
treaty. There's agreements in international law with that. Now, with this, it's a new area of law. It's very different. It's with emerging technologies, sort of new avenues to commit crime come up. Now, with this particular one, it would be interesting to see how they resolve it, because we don't see it as illegal. A good example would be something that's illegal.
Is it legal?
Is
it
illegal
a legal
in the UK
issue or a moral issue?
It's both.
It's
both. It's illegal and ethical. From a legal perspective, it's illegal in the UK for this practice to happen. We're aiding and abetting this practice, but it's not illegal here. And one comparison we can use where we can do the inverse of this is, for example, polygamy, where polygamy is legal here, but it's illegal in the UK. So what happens if you go with your two wives to the UK, and what they do is they don't recognize the second wife. They'll only recognize the first one, but they're not going to jail you because
so they'll be silent on that.
They turn a blind eye.
So
they're not out looking. They're not out looking, for you. But you're not going to have the same rights that you would here with your, as a spouse, as a second spouse, because here polygamy is legal, there it isn't. But that's a slight comparison, probably not the best one I can give. I'm trying to think how we would resolve this, because it's not illegal here, but we're still aiding and abetting something that is illegal there. And what you will find is through negotiations, the government will actually put some pressure on our government.
Here, I'm also still contending on that.
it's
When
not
Wainaina
illegal.
tells us that it's happening in universities, are you telling me that if you caught somebody who's doing that here locally for somebody here locally, that would not be wrong?
No, but remember what we're doing. It's not illegal for me to write a paper. It's illegal for you to present it as yours. For me to write a paper and give it to you, it's not illegal. Although it could be I was aiding and abetting. But it's not illegal.
There you go. You've said it.
Try and prove that in court. Let's see how you go, how far you go with that.
There was an opportunity, there was a need, and then there was a fulfilling of that need. And it was handed over and was given. You paid me for the work that I did for you. However, what you do with it later actually is none of my concern. I finished and I gave it to you. If we're now trying to cross whatever boundaries we're trying to cross. And here we are on this side where we are filling a much needed gap. We talked about unemployment levels in this country to the point of biting, to the point of where people are actually throwing their hands up and trying to say, maybe I need to go to another country and see if I can get my daily bread.
So
right?
a criminal somewhere in the
And here we
reaches
have
out to us and gives us an opportunity. So we
Did
take
you say a criminal reaches out to us? A
Eric,
criminal
it
reaches
isn't
out to us?
criminal.
Oh, come on.
It's
Eric.
criminal in that country. If somebody is committing a crime, what are they? They are criminal. So a
Eric.
criminal in the UK is actually looking out for an opportunity, and you take up that opportunity here.
Eric, that's a fraudulent argument. Very fraudulent. Look,
is it criminal?
In the this is a legal issue. In the US, you are allowed to bribe so long as you call it lobbying. Jerry, you are the one who understands legal matters more than I do. We are discussing a legal matter here. The moment it is legalized, the moment legislation is there to provide for it, it stops being illegal. Believe me. Why is it that, for instance, something like abortion is illegal here? Abortion.
Because the churches got involved in the law and decided they know when life starts.
Here we go.
Because the law.
Here we go. It's
the
the law.
The law has deemed it so.
It is the law. It's not moral issues will come in, but it is the law. This issue will be resolved by legislation.
So that's it. We actually put it in through legislation.
If you think it's an issue that requires legislation,
We
it
take it.
isn't a moral issue.
Take it through the legislation.
It isn't a
0719
moral issue.
012 This is a heated one this morning. It's about academic writing. So we are being sought after worldwide by people who have been called by their own newspapers as lazy students in the US and the UK, and they're coming to us because we are hardworking. Is it okay for us to do so? 0719 012 It's now 8 o'clock. Good morning.
Spice up your life. Traffic.
Mombasa Road is bumper to bumper all the way from Syokimau. There is no end in sight, is what we hear. And we don't know what's causing that. Probably just a normal Tuesday morning traffic, but today it is in larger proportions. All right, coming out of Wayaki Way and also Thika Road, as well as Ngong Road and Langata Road. Traffic is moving. It's slow, but it's moving. Nothing terribly out of the ordinary, rather. So let's see what the situation looks like in about an hour or so, but we'll get to that time where it should have dissipated and you should be fine. Not to forget, our number is 0719012600, or give us a call, send us a message on Twitter if we need to give information about where you are. Let us know.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have Jerry Thorne, lawyer, political strategist, an insider in the corridors of power, ready to take on any side of the debate with her signature eloquence and grit. C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
The biggest conversation this morning is on academic writing, right or wrong.
Well,
Right.
from an ethical perspective, I think we can draw from a very interesting scenario, which is the president has his speeches written for him, doesn't he?
But again, yes, he does.
Oh my God.
No, let's think about it. It's the
Not
same
just
principle.
this one. All
presidents.
Yeah.
It's the same
And we've
principle.
even had cases where those speeches have been taken and
Is a speech
replicated
an exam?
by someone else, then have
Yes,
used
it
them
is.
to push forward.
Isn't
a
that
certain
ghostwriting?
idea.
A speech is an exam because there are speeches that are repeated over and over, and people are judged by what they said at the same
Yeah,
time.
and when he's reading it, he says, I, this, he speaks in first person.
My government.
It's an exam,
Yes.
a very serious exam.
So that could be considered ghostwriting if we're going to look at the illegalities and the absurdities that, criminalizing it could lead to. So perhaps it's for the UK to try and push to see where these people are getting their their writing from. So to try and create maybe software where emails can be picked up and so on, so that they can stop it. But in terms of trying to criminalize it from our end, I think it would be very difficult from a legislation
Let's think
perspective.
about the UK. Should they be trying to stop it? Why not
On
just
their
try?
side,
I've given you examples.
If they have such a big issue with it, they need to deal with the issues
need
in
to
their
realize
backyard before they come and start disturbing people here. And
The
that's what
same
I'm
way
saying
we
is very
accept, we say
clear.
we accept our tribal issues, we accept all the issues that we have, accept and start dealing with them.
They
We
should
have
not
Accept and
worry.
move on.
They should
Accept
not
and
worry.
move on.
They should not worry at all. Look, they should now start dealing with those issues that they have. It because you actually find that we have that even in this report, you have some people who do this work, and they say to the point that the people who are hiring them to do this
You know
work
what
are
Eric said?
very specific.
Yes, I heard what
We
Eric
heard.
said.
They're
But-
very specific, and they say no plagiarism whatsoever. We will check if there's, because they have all of these things in place. So they're also very sure about what they cannot do, and that means that they're dealing from the laws on their end.
So should
and that's
we-
why I'm saying
so
they
should we-
should deal with their own
Should we
issues.
assist the UK in learning how to understand, to accept things, and to
And to move on. Yes, we should help them. They'll be all right.
Regularize it.
Eric
Realize.
said the way we have our tribal issues, you know that.
We just accept and
And
move on.
corruption.
Corruption.
And corruption. Yeah.
We are who we are.
Don't
And now we
worry.
accept. Be
Be
happy.
happy.
And
Yes.
we can help you.
What's your problem? 0719 012 That's 0719 012 So the reality is that there are very many people in this country, young and not so young, who have taken advantage of this academic writing. So the platforms, what did you call them, Ndu?
The Ajira
The Ajira
Digital-
platform.
No, not the Ajira one. The other
The
one, where the
accounts.
accounts.
The accounts,
So the
yes.
accounts, they open up accounts, and you're able to service some
Yeah.
people outside the
if
country.
you open
Wow.
the website,
Eric, we are
you're
not
on a roll
discussing
today.
veterinary
an
science.
interesting
Yes,
account.
but carry on.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
it's a service.
Yes.
It's a service. You're not providing any. So you're
If
able
you
to
went on the
service these
internet now,
accounts
you would
and
be
do
able to
something.
get. If you went on the internet now, you'd be able to look. You'd have an idea of some of those websites, and you'd be able to get the information. Granted, you would get the smaller jobs. Maybe you would get $5, $10. But as you worked your way up, you would be able to get those fat accounts when you're earning $100 to $200 a day.
Eric, you see, the really interesting thing about this is that the people we're talking about are products of the 844 system. So, how terrible is this system?
Because if you're able to write a PhD thesis for someone with a high school, because interesting enough, the report also noted that some of the people who are writing these are not necessarily graduates. They're people who went to high school and then were looking for a job.
But that lends itself to what Njeri was saying, that these are people who have capacity,
Yes.
but were probably never given an opportunity
And
for
they were
expression.
subjected to a test.
So this system that we are saying allows them, it makes up for
To
what
thrive.
had been failed earlier on, but they now have an opening to actually thrive and excel.
I wonder if Nelson agrees.
That's
Nelson,
rich.
good morning.
That's rich, CT.
Good morning.
How are
Good
you? Welcome
morning.
to the Situation Room.
Thank you. I want to throw a spanner into the discussion. this
Here we
morning.
go.
Which part of the discussion do you want to throw the spanner in?
About this whole academic writing thing.
Okay.
Here's the thing. It didn't start with Ajira.
It didn't.
It started with other sites like Upwork,
Yes.
there's freelancer.com, and there's Fiverr.
You know
But
them,
now
Nelson.
yes, I do know them because I'm in the industry. I don't do academic writing, however, but I'm in the industry.
You're a middleman.
Sell accounts.
In the industry of apps.
Sell accounts.
I'm a middleman.
Okay.
However, what I've realized is I tend to think there's an element here of British imperialism at play. Because I am sorry, but I have to bring in that argument because actually I'm apologizing. Because here's the thing, they have gone on those Teamwork, Upwork and freelancer.com and such like sites. They've gone and started closing accounts of Africans who are doing academic writing. However, if you register with a British account or an American account or an Australian account, those accounts are live. So I tend to think that the reason why it's become such a big thing now is because there are so many people from this side of the world, from the developing world, who are now making a healthy
we are
income.
outdoing them.
Yes, we are outdoing them. Yeah? And that is why they are closing their accounts. The issue, it's not about an issue of morality. And like, I think it was Eric who said about the president's speech being written for him.
It's Jerry.
Yeah? It's Jerry who brought in that argument.
Yes.
Also, in the case of an academic paper,
in the case of a thesis or a dissertation, you still have to go defend it, isn't it?
You have to defend it, absolutely.
No,
So
that is at a certain level, at a certain stage. So for a PhD, you have to defend it, or a thesis.
Even at the masters, yeah.
To defend the
you
master.
have to defend it. You have to know the material.
Not in the UK.
So even as much as you're sourcing the writing for you, you're sourcing the writing, you still have to read, go through the material and understand it, defend it. So I don't see anything wrong with that.
Excellent.
Thank you.
From a moral perspective, because you don't know how the paper will be used, I gave the example of, it's extreme, but it's to highlight and really illustrate some of the dire consequences and maybe bring to fore, or to help us understand some of the consequences, or what the repercussions could be, where it's a medical student and you write a paper for him and he goes on to become a doctor, and it was an element that was needed, it was critical for a particular surgery, which he then carries out without the knowledge because you've done this paper for him, and the patient then dies.
Let me spin your argument here a bit.
No, it's not an argument. It's just a scenario I've given you.
Okay, spin the scenario.
Let me spin it. I give you some piece of work, do for me. I don't care what it is, and I pay you 10,000 shillings. You go buy drugs and you get an overdose. Does that make me the bad person?
If you knew I was going to buy the drugs, if you knew it's a high possibility I was going to buy the drugs, then I think you have a role to play in it. Would you feel bad? Would you feel bad if you knew I was going to buy drugs and take an overdose and you still give me the money and you had the option to give me food? Would you feel bad?
The question is, I paid you for a service. I paid you for a service that you rendered unto me. And then from the process of that service, you went and misused the money. Does that make me the bad person?
If you know I'm going to misuse the money, no. We could spin this anyway. The point is, you know that what is happening is already academic dishonesty, and I've given you some examples of some of the repercussions of that when it's quite a crucial thing like medicine, and somebody writes a paper for somebody. Now, would that sit well with you?
Well, the thing is, I don't think any self-respecting university would pass a student who and what they write in the exam don't match. I know I failed a unit like that. I outsourced a paper. I didn't read the material. When I started the paper, there was a disconnect between what was on the paper and what I wrote in the exam.
Outsourced.
So I failed the paper.
So you're involved on both sides of the academic dishonesty. You're aiding and abetting, but you've also
okay.
You yourself
are
part of the practice.
Here's the thing, guys. This is a practice that happens in not just academic writing. It happens also in the workplace.
Right.
People are outsourcing services all through. I'm even asked by my boss. I delegated to my junior. Yeah, does that make it dishonest?
If you try and pass it off as your own, then there's an element of dishonesty. But you see, the repercussions are not as dire as if it's academic work and research that you're passing off as your own and maybe getting hired and getting jobs for something you might not be an expert as you purport to be, because there was a whole chunk of the module that you didn't do. I mean, it's all to do with the moral fiber of our society. These are the little things, little micro.
Nelson, do you feel the moral bit? Are you feeling the ethical bit?
Does it not bother you at all?
That people are doing it?
That you've done it?
Well, when I did it for yes, I felt guilty. I did it.
You felt guilty. Why did you feel guilty?
But here's the thing, guys. Yeah? I believe anybody who's engaging someone to write for them an academic paper still has to read and understand the material.
You can rationalize it and you can try and sort of explain it away, but you're getting involved in something that is criminal elsewhere. Although we might not consider it criminal, but look at the ethical. I've given you an example where it could lead.
Does it make me a criminal?
No. I'm talking about the criminal element. I've left that aside. Sorry, I'm talking about the moral or ethical perspective
side of things now.
And I've given you an example of some of the sort of repercussions from this practice, and you would be part of that.
Where somebody did not read and they presented and they passed. Imagine if you did that, Nelson.
In the case of things like medicine, yes, I'd agree. But then, like, for example, in the medicine field, after you write your exam, you still have to go and do residency for a period, I think, of a year or two.
Yes.
At which point, if you don't know the material, that will be flashed out.
Yes.
It will be flashed
So
out.
that you can choose to rationalize it like that.
Papers were written for you.
Nelson,
You can choose to rationalize it
if
like
we're
that.
to follow Jerry's perspective,
let's Nelson, thank you very much for your call this morning.
Somebody else?
You're welcome.
Asante.
Carry on.
0719-012-600. You want to say, if you want to follow Jerry's argument to its logical conclusion.
Well, not necessarily, but just follow that logic. Then it means that if I have associations through work with America, and I am polygamous, then I should just take myself to jail because in America polygamy is illegal.
No.
Yes.
I said put the legal aspect aside. Let's look at it from an ethical perspective. There was a meme.
These are legal issues. They're not ethical.
No. This is ethical. There's the legal perspective.
No.
Just because something is not illegal, it doesn't make it ethical. Lying is not illegal.
Our discussions here. That's why. You heard the assertion I made when we were discussing this matter of lying. I said we should criminalize lying because I know.
But at the moment, it's not illegal to lie, but it's unethical.
And so what we're doing now is not illegal. It's not even unethical.
Until the moment it becomes illegal.
Yes.
Yeah. I haven't said
until
it's
the law is
illegal.
applied, because we also have
it's unethical.
the arm of
Nathaniel.
government that has regulated it is existing here amongst us, and if it is seen as something that should be that the law should be applied to, then we will deal with it then.
Let's go to JKIA. Nathaniel, good morning.
Yes, good morning, Eric. How are you?
Are you flying out? Are you coming in? Are you just hanging around?
No, I was dropping someone.
All right.
First of all, I would like to say sorry for what Jerry is feeling for her up-country home.
What?
Okay.
Wow. Right.
Jerry
and then second,
is as Kenyan as you and I, and Hashags is Nakuru.
Number two.
She's
is,
ours.
Yes.
Number two. What I know is it is hard for you to use your neighbor's laws to make proceedings in your home.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, if it is criminal in the UK, we are not going to copy it because it is criminal there. However, I'd like to bring it that we are not likely to make it criminal for the time being or any time soon, because the people who study in the UK are not my kids or my neighbor's kids. They are someone who has influence over our laws and stuff. So those people are not going to make what favors them illegal
in Kenya.
Yes. And then lastly is it is a good example that has been given of a doctor. However, it is not just the academic writing that makes you pass your exams.
I said we can rationalize it any which way, but it's a possibility. The example, a scenario I've given you, is an example or is a possibility of a repercussion from your actions if you're involved in this practice.
Yes, it is very true, and I agree with you. However, it requires a smart person to understand what has been written by someone they've hired and personalize it in their defense or presentation. So the writing bit should not be criminalized or made illegal. We should just be allowed to make some little money.
Nathaniel, thank you very much. I should be allowed to make some little money.
But it's when we talk about the fabric or the moral fabric of our society, which we have done in our value system, it's these little micro unethical practices added up and put together that create the society that we then complain about.
Where we can justify things and say, well, but it's fine.
He must be clever anyway. He would have been a good doctor anyway.
It's not even just that. It is more a question of where the complaint comes from. We've had cheating in this country. We complained about it.
We make noise about it.
When we made noise about it, we accepted the medicine that was prescribed for the cure. We accepted it. There was a murmurs here and this, but we accepted. But when the UK is complaining about something that Kenyans feel it's benefiting Kenyans, that thing isn't going to go anywhere.
It becomes a problem. Locally, we keep complaining
just
about
talk.
our
We
political
just talk.
leaders. Some of them have now acquired degrees, and you're like, this person must have used some academic writers to actually do their assignments for them. And then we are complaining about it and saying that is wrong. That's why we end up having people, yes, they have degrees, but they shouldn't have those degrees.
They have pieces
and
of
leading
paper
us. They have
that
pieces of
indicate, yes, but when put to the test, they are found to be wanting. Now, because it doesn't affect any Kenyan listening to this will ask, how does this affect me? It affects them in that it could actually deny them employment.
Right.
This is not something they will find moral or immoral. They will not find it immoral. Not
all
at all.
they're thinking about is either it's increasing or like you say, denying their employment, and that is what they're going to stick on. In terms, look, I can guarantee you that the thought of ethics or morality does not cross their minds when they're doing this work.
Doesn't feature even
It doesn't
briefly.
feature at all, because you're oftentimes looking at people who have not had what to do, not just what to do, but what to do that is going to earn them something that will allow them to maintain a certain livelihood. That's what they're looking
corruption.
Should we allow it? Should we not? Final
Like,
thoughts
allow
on
the
this.
people to do the work that they're doing.
No. Allow what? It's already allowed.
It's being done. They're
It's
doing
being done. Allow what?
We have a government
Should we
platform,
encourage
digital
it then?
platform.
My words
No,
should we encourage it?
Eric,
Should we
there's
not?
nothing that we can do. These are
It's
market
being
forces.
done. It's there.
We can
If you want to
discourage
change
it
this
if it's
thing,
affecting-
legislate it. Legislate it.
That's how we can change it.
Yes,
That's
and
we
see
can
how
make
far
it.
we go with that legislation.
Thank you very much for your contribution. 0719-012-600. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, The Situation Room. My name is Eric Latif. We have Ndu Okor, Jerry Thorne, and C.T. Muga. It's 20 minutes to after 8 o'clock.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
From Nairobi to the world on www.spicefm.co.ke, on Facebook, SpiceFMKE, on our YouTube channel, that is SpiceFMKE. And the conversation also happens on Twitter. Our handle is SpiceFMKE. Please follow us and join in the conversation via the hashtag The Situation Room. We're broadcasting to Malindi on 97.7, Nyeri 90.9, 96.7 in Eldoret, Nakuru 96.0, 102.5 in Kisumu, 87.9 in Mombasa, 94.4 in Nairobi. Let's talk about the train to nowhere.
Yes, this has been in the papers. I myself have contributed significantly in not only pointing fingers but pouring very hot oil on the SGR. And I have pointed out to the many, many faults that lie within it, but chief of which is what it has cost us and what we have gotten for the money that we have spent. But if I put that aside today and give this matter a much broader perspective, I would start, let's just call it development projects, and let's talk about even the continent and ask ourselves, is it possible for a situation to arise where a project is actually conceived, brought into being, and yet it fails, and everything that was considered to be prudent was done? The World Bank is known for precisely that, prudence. They take care when a project is conceived. When you take it to the process to the point where they are funding it, they've done everything conceivable. Due diligence has been done at every stage. And yet, this continent has witnessed some of the biggest failures in projects that have been funded by the World Bank. Let me just mention a few. Chad-Cameroon oil pipeline to the Atlantic Ocean. This was a $4.2 billion project in 2003.
$billion.
Dollars. Every figure I mention here is in dollars, not Kenya shillings, not Zimbabwean dollars, Kenya shillings.
US dollars.
Thank you very much. Excellent. We are paying attention. Well done, class. In this country, we had the Lake Turkana fishing process plant. This was a $22 million project. It was conceived in 1971, put into operation in 1986. It went belly up. Then there was the Lesotho Highlands water. They wanted, the mountains in Lesotho. They wanted to harvest this water, bring it down, sell some of it to South Africa. It was 1996. This was a $3.5 billion project. It went. Then there was the decision to try and sort of kill malaria and make sure that it doesn't affect the people it does on this continent. It was called the Rollback Malaria Across Africa, $500 million. That one didn't just, it did a tumbleton and a flip, meaning it went belly up with a little twist and dance in the process, but it went belly up. How did these things go belly up? Each and every of these projects, something had been miscounted, miscalculated. In the Chad Cameroon pipeline, what they miscalculated was how the leaders of in charge of these projects would perceive the project and how they would consider their own personal benefits and how this in turn would ensure or guarantee the project failed completely. They never did what they were supposed to do, and yet it was funded. The Lake Turkana fishing project didn't understand one thing. The community that this project, they had, well, a factory for ensuring that there was fillet. It was a factory to ensure that they could dry the fish. These people tended to be nomadic. They moved around. So this wasn't going to be very useful. All these projects have a problem. In this country, we've had projects when our former President Kibaki was Minister for Finance. The important thing was there was a lot of noise about it. There was noise about the pipeline. This was supposed to save our roads, to ensure that actually oil got to where it got to, and the heavy tankers that kept messing up our roads weren't there. A lot of noise was made. But what is of interest is the pipeline was built, and it actually turned out to be a very useful project. There was a lot of noise made when they wanted to build the molasses plant. A lot of noise was made in this country. They said it wouldn't work. Oddly enough, it did work, and it still worked. When JKI was planned, we had Embakasi. They wanted JKI to have 3 runways like Heathrow. Oh, no, now this one, people went to town. There's nothing they didn't say. Okay, we ended up with probably just 1 runway because they said Nairobi would never have the sort of traffic. We've turned out that not only do we have the traffic, we need more. We're now thinking of building even more runways. So the amount of noise that is made when a project is conceived and when it's first operationalized doesn't always point to the usefulness of that project. And this brings me to today's discussion, the SGR. A lot of noise has been made about GSGR, how it doesn't work. If we put aside the cost and just ask ourselves, when the Mombasa, Kenya-Uganda railway was first conceived, why do you think it was called the Lunatic Express? It was mad.
Total lunacy.
Madness. What are these people doing? But some visionaries saw this. In many ways, the SGR is actually precisely that.
It's a lunatic.
It is visionary.
I see.
The SGR line to Suswa, which is now being called the line to nowhere, it sounds that way if you haven't been to Suswa, if you haven't been to Naivasha.
If you don't know where Suswa is.
Yes, it will sound crazy. And people who talked about Uganda didn't know where it was. People who were talking about Kenya then didn't even know where Kenya was. Some of the most beautiful land that we have in this country that lies idle, I'm not saying it doesn't have ownership, lies idle, is in that area. What does infrastructure do? One of the basic foundations of infrastructure is it creates opportunity. Yes, it brings about an opportunity for things that had hitherto not been possible to now become possible. Roads do that, electricity does that, the railway also does that. So the SGR, by its very nature, is visionary. What it can do is visionary. What it can achieve is visionary. That's what I want us to look at today.
Would it be visionary if it just ended at Suswa?
It would.
The vision would still be sustained?
It would be sustained because if you had a railway, perhaps I should answer this by giving the example. The old railway system that we had in Kenya went to Thika. It didn't just stop at Thika. It went further. And you'd ask, but what was it doing there? Well, there was agricultural produce it needed to bring in. But it isn't Thika that I'm talking about. From Thika, it would branch out and even go into Murang'a. I know many people don't know this, so I'm telling them. It would branch out and go maybe to some area where there's some small business. Meaning, it made it possible for people to actually transport, not necessarily goods, but even themselves. The moment there's a railway line that reaches a certain destination, it means it can branch off to other areas. It opens up. That's what it does. It opens up areas. Some of the small towns that this railway went, like Sagana, you'd say, but it was nowhere. Sagana isn't nowhere. So long as there are human beings living there, it isn't nowhere. And an area like Suswa is on the way by road to Naivasha, to Nakuru, onwards,
to Bomet,
into Sudan, onwards, into Egypt, onwards. It's on the way. It isn't nowhere.
You have a point in terms of, opening up socioeconomic activities. We saw that with Thika Road, and the property prices went up. You had a number of different establishments come up as well in terms of, in the hospitality industry, eateries and so on. And there's no doubt that, I'll agree with you to some extent. The SGR was visionary.
Disagreeing, causing some mental.
If you notice, I put a disclaimer there.
Yes,
I said to some extent.
It's causing a health concern.
I think most people's contention with the SGR is how much the SGR cost, and how much we're going to recoup from that or recover from that, how long it's going to take us to pay that debt. And whether, I think the World Bank suggestion was that actually we could have just revamped the old railway. That was their sort of suggestion.
They
in this.
always
I haven't
have
read the report.
Don't they?
I haven't read the report, but it would have cost us a fifth of the cost. I think it was $3.6 billion
by revamping the old meter gauge railway.
Went into the SGR, 3.6 billion, and then now it's like, I think currently costing us 12 billion shillings to actually maintain. This is not it's not a profit-making venture. The government has now come out and said that we're not supposed to make money from the SGR. The government's not supposed to make money from the SGR, but even just to maintain the railway and to pay the firm that maintains it and runs it, it's 12 billion shillings. Now, there's a vision there, no doubt, but as to whether it will crystallize,
at what costs?
Absolutely, and whether it will crystallize in our lifetime, and we'll see what the vision was, is another question altogether. In terms of opening up socioeconomic activities in remote areas, fantastic. It will do that. There'll be a hive of lots of activity in these areas. You'll see little shops setting up and so on. So there's no doubt about that. But I think the cost is what people's issue were, and I think also
does the World Bank make sense when it's and the other economists have come up and said, well, the things you should have done is just revamp the old meter gauge railway
at a fifth of the cost.
And then you still have it. I mean, it's there. You don't have to buy new land. That all area is railway
would have been
land.
much cheaper.
So you remove the cost of land, you remove the cost of all those things, and just revamp it, and you have a new railway, as good as new anyway.
That was the World Bank suggestion.
What does that make sense? If you think about it, if you rationalize it, does that make sense? Would it actually serve as a
Why
purpose?
shouldn't it make sense?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense. In fact, what they were saying was you didn't need to build a new railway. Even that rail that existed could be expanded. And you would even ask a further question, are there places where you have a 1 meter gauge railway? And the answer is yes. Are there places that produce sort of like engines that run on that railway? The answer is yes. So they had a point. A very valid point. They do get it right from time to time, by the way.
but
Broken clock.
What I wonder, though, is when they talk about that going to a third of the cost, are they talking about also doing a fifth of the cost? Are we talking about a fifth of the cost by putting up those new stations, new railway stations?
Absolutely. I'm sure it's everything. They don't miss out anything.
Going to the capacity
the chairs
to
and the train, absolutely everything.
Doing the capacity to do
have you been on the
to
SGR?
Double stack. Yes, I have.
Have you been on the? You've been on the SGR.
Yep.
CT, have you been on the SGR? Because when you use the word vision, it's slightly astounding and sort of counterintuitive. Have you been on the SGR?
Yes.
Vision to me at this day and age has an element of sort of innovation, technology, forward, fast moving. I didn't get that sense, to be honest. The SGR, the fastest train at the moment in the world it goes at 267 or 268 miles per hour. I think with the SGR we're at 60 miles per hour or 80 miles.
Wait, why do I want to get
about
to Mombasa in a hurry?
I think time is of the essence when it comes to sort of. So why build the SGR in the first instance?
You can take a plane or a bus if you want to go quicker. The point I'm making is people take the train because they consider it to be leisurely.
Not when it comes to sort of business activities.
Based on the
speed
railway,
is
or is it
crucial.
speed based on the actual engine that you're having?
I would have thought it's the engine, but can the railway accommodate the faster
yes,
trains?
It can.
Yes,
But
it can.
this fast, as fast as we're seeing what's 270.
as fast as the Chinese ones.
Technology,
It's totally different technology, and I think
Why
this
didn't we
train that
build
were
that
talking
then?
about
Why
was in
didn't we
China.
build that? If there's the
Cost.
latest technology, why didn't we build that?
Cost.
For this cost, would have been able to do it. 3.6 million.
And still buy land.
Yes, no, Nigeria has a point. The Ethiopians did it, just so that you understand.
The Ethiopians, and that
did
example
it.
has been given so many times.
I'm giving it again.
Yes, and the people who have countered that have also said, if you look at the case of Ethiopia, What was it that they were doing with their money? They were not buying land. They were not putting up all these bridges that we have. How many
the
bridges do we
terrain
have?
is very different.
How many stations do they put up?
Eric,
all those things have to be put into consideration.
It's a dictatorship. There was no public participation. There was no all these things that we see in Kenya that cost us and so on.
Public
you didn't have
costs.
that. Absolutely, it costs. It's a hindrance. First of all, it takes time. It costs to communicate to the public, for example.
Anything that furthers the interest of the country development cannot be considered a hindrance.
It's a cost in terms of cost.
Everything
it's a hindrance in terms of cost.
Has a cost, and cost isn't always a hindrance.
Either way, it's a cost.
I think the money that was spent on public participation on this SGR is not as much as we'd like to say.
How much money was spent on public participation?
Was it an example? It's not the best.
Even any
it's
at
not
all.
The best example.
It's 28 minutes to 9 o'clock. Let's take a look at the traffic. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room. We're broadcasting from Nairobi to the world. My name is Eric Latif. We have Jerry Thorne, Nduoko, and C.T. Muga, who's saying, well, let's take a look at SGR. It's actually a visionary project. What do you think? We'll open up the phone lines, 0719 012 600. Good morning.
Spice up your life. Traffic.
All right, so Wayaki Way is crazy. Jam. And you must understand, this is because we're waiting to get exam papers. And everybody is converged in this one place. So it's been said it'll take you 36 years to get from Kangemi to Safaricom with the jam that is being experienced on Wayaki Way this morning. All right, so buckle down. You're going to be there for a while if you're on that road. Bumper to bumper situation on Mombasa Road. It's normal at this time. Looking at other roads in the city, also normal situations. Getting into the City Stadium roundabout from Jogo Road is all right. Getting to the Globes in the roundabout, coming off of the Thika Superhighway and coming in from different parts of the city also is slow, but it's moving. Eventually you'll get there. That's what it looks like. See anything different, do let us know. Ngong Road and Langata Road are not too painful this morning. Let's see how we can relieve your pain by giving you alternates. If you find them, let us know and we'll spread the word. 0719 012 600.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Good morning. It's 25 minutes to 9 o'clock. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation on Spice FM, broadcasting in Nairobi on 94.4. We're in Mombasa, Kisumu, Nakuru, Eldoret, Nyeri, Malindi. And if you're around Suswa, our frequency in Nakuru region is 96.0. And C.T. Muga this morning is saying that the SGR, much as people have complained about it, made noise about it, first of all, it's not unique that you're making noise. Noise has been made since time immemorial. But look at it from the point of the visionary. It's actually a visionary project. It's going to open up a huge aspects of our economy. Look at Suswa, the area. There's going to be an inland container depot. That means it's going to be a huge economic hub. And then look at Nairobi inland container depot, the Nairobi terminus. Look at Mombasa as well. It's still there's a huge terminus at Miritini. Did you know about Miritini before the SGR? Well,
yes, I did.
Well, of course you did, CT.
So you weren't asking me the question?
No, I wasn't asking you.
Okay.
For those who may not have known that such an area, well, I do agree that projects like this definitely would raise the profile of a certain area economically. Through infrastructure, you then have more people gravitating there by virtue of the fact that the SGR would pass through that area, and they would see an opportunity then to go and set up a business or things like this because of the infrastructure that has been placed. Because you're not just going to have an SGR running through. You're going to have depot, like you said. You're going to have stations, and you're going to have stations which require people to have accommodation in close proximity to the stations. I mean, so there the profile of the area is immediately, or at least over time, elevated, and that is what happens. I think obviously oftentimes because of projects that we have seen that unfortunately have failed, that is why you have the hue and cry with what we have so far. We've not even been able to get anywhere. So now we have something new. How far are we going to be able to do it? Apart from the cost issue of it, people now raise the issue like, okay, here's another project, really, SGR to nowhere, train to nowhere, as it were. Is it really going to help us, or is it going to harm us, especially with what we're going to have to pay for it, because it don't come free, as they say.
A lot of our comments arise from, one, the consistent debt ceiling that our government seems to raise. And the hue and cry has been, one doesn't see what this money is doing to change the livelihood or the day-to-day management of people's lives in the country. So against this backdrop where there is mistrust, even when something was intended to be wonderful, it will not easily be seen, because the lenses through which you're looking at the project are all these things that keep, let's call them hurdles, that you keep having to overcome. Now, this railway, this train, I know it appears like it does 60 kilometers. That's what it averages, but it has a maximum speed of 120 kilometers an hour, which is around something like 75 miles per hour. That's fast by any standards.
No, not by global standards, no. I don't
Our
want
speeds
to
in this country are limited to 110 by vehicle on the highway. Limited.
This is not a highway.
So, but the railway would move faster than your car.
And so it should, and it does abroad.
Jerry, you must get this thing into your head. I'm talking about Kenya and what Kenya
But why,
needs.
if we're going to build something, build the best that there is, or the best that we can afford. We could afford it for $3.6 billion. We could afford it better. That's my point.
The argument that has been leveled against this by using the counter argument for Ethiopia was easily countered by simply ensuring that you revamp the old railway. You already owned the land. It was yours. The line existed. All these extraneous costs would simply not exist. There was a capacity for expansion. Whatever you wanted to do was readily available. Okay? Now, when a project is envisioned, let me talk about why I'm calling it visionary. It's what it was intended to do, what it could do, and what it would achieve in terms of the development agenda of the country. That's what I considered visionary. It was taking
not the
advantage.
Speed of the train.
No.
That's not visionary. No.
Speed was not really my consideration. And given that
the speed of moving goods is crucial.
It is crucial, but please understand that the railway, even as it's currently constituted with all its issues, would move goods faster than the lorries.
It does. If you consider that it does, let's even do an average of 100. Right, and you stack
100 kilometers
an hour, yes, and you stack them up, double decker, the way they're stacking up the containers now. How many containers are you actually moving at a speed of 100 kilometers an hour, constant, from Mombasa?
But we could do
all
this
the
even
way to
faster. That's my point. We could do this even faster. The only point CT has made today is the idea that there'll be a hive of activity around what were previously remote areas. With that, I agree with. We've seen that, and I think the best example is, as I said earlier, Thika Road. We've seen the property prices go up in Thika Road. We've seen it become a commuter belt, or rather, what we call them, dormitory towns. Dormitory town. We've seen lots of businesses spring up there. So in terms of socioeconomic activity, it will bring social economic activity. There's a station actually that had nothing on the way down to Mombasa. I think it's between Voi and Mombasa. What's it called?
Titwande.
No, it's on the SGR.
Mariakani?
No, it's a really weird. I'd never heard of it.
Is it nearer Nairobi or is it nearer Mombasa?
It's nearer Mombasa.
Oh, between Voi and Mombasa.
I think so.
Mariakani?
One of the new ones or one of the old
ones? It's a new one. I'd never heard of it, and there was absolutely nothing there.
Now there's something.
No, well, there will be something.
Now there's a station.
Kibwezi, Emali?
No.
That can't be.
No.
Kibwezi and Emali are not between Voi and Mombasa.
I've just realized
City,
as I was saying
heading?
this, as I was saying this, I've realized we're using Jerry's standards for new. Yes. she came across it recently, so it's new.
It's new. And there was nothing there before.
Even you guys don't know it, but there's a station
But
there.
how do we not know it and we don't know what you're talking about?
Think of the stations from Nairobi. Where do you go after Nairobi? You go to Mutito, to Athi River.
Athi River, and
After
then you have
Athi River.
Emali, and then from Emali you get to Kibwezi, and then Mutitwande,
then
and then you get to
Voi,
Voi, and then from between Voi and Mariakani there's another station. I don't know
Yes.
whether it's Taru.
Miasenyi is what it's called.
Yes, that's the one. What's it called?
Miasenyi.
Miasenyi. Had you heard of it?
You realize that
Yeah,
you
exactly.
could have
So
said
it's new.
anything.
No, I know it. No, I know it. Miasenyi.
Okay.
For your
Had you ever heard of
For your
it?
purposes, Miasenyi. I'd never heard of it.
Yeah, exactly. So, and there's absolutely nothing
Miasenyi never existed before, but now we have.
Now we have it.
A place called Miasenyi in Kenya.
It always existed. Like, for instance, how many Kenyans do you think knew there's a place called Suswa?
I knew Mount Suswa.
The Suswa Declaration.
Is it on the way to Narok?
Okay, let me ask the
Yes,
question.
it is.
How many of you know that there's a small place on that railway route called Ilkek?
Which railway?
Ilkek?
The one to Mombasa?
No, on the way to...
Between Nairobi and Suswa.
It must have been asleep.
Between Nairobi and Suswa.
Ilkek.
Right?
Yes.
And it's a station?
All right, one just after Naivasha called Morandat.
Yeah, that one I know. They get
The
beef.
point I'm making is, if you traveled by railway, which I did as a child, you knew all the railway stations. Because you saw them every often when you went to school. Now, rail travel by its very nature in this country was not intended to be fast. People took it because it was leisurely and it gave you an opportunity to actually see the country. That's what it did.
The SGR was not intended to be leisurely and to give people the
And the
opportunity.
SGR is not slow.
That's to pay $13.6 billion for leisure. We're stretching it a bit as a developing country.
Remember, one of the things
As
that
a developing
Is this
country.
about communication? Is it that communication is completely wanting in this particular project?
What Njeri has done today, she's taken my normal line of argument. Okay, I have abandoned it for today's purposes. Okay, I'm not kicking the government in the teeth at all. I'm not even removing my shoes.
No, I've got great things to say about. I've got great things to say about the SGR, but we can't sit here and gloat over the SGR, whereas we know the cost.
I'm actually not talking about the good things about the SGR. No, I'm talking about the importance of being visionary. That's really what I'm talking about here.
Sorry.
No, please.
You think the SGR and visionary go
Yes.
hand in hand?
The idea behind the SGR was definitely visionary.
Right.
And
That's-
yes, please.
It points to elements of vision.
If you look at that Lunatic Express in 1900, right? And
it began before 1900.
1850,
Yeah,
1890,
now you're
1890,
thinking, yes.
1890 to 1905.
Yes.
And 1901. When they did from Mombasa going all the way to Kisumu, is it the same time when they were doing the one to Thika, the one to Mwishoareli, Nanyuki, and the rest of the places?
This is how they did it. In most cases, the railway was built alongside the road. And they also put up telephone poles alongside the same road. Why? If you think about it, it was very logical. If you build the road, you had a means of transporting whatever material you need for building the railway. And the same material could be used for increasing communication, which was then posed for the telephone lines. So to answer your question, the answer is yes and no.
Whilst you're giving facts, how many people died building that railway? In terms, I think there was a number that were eaten by
The lions of Tsavo.
the man-eating lions.
And malaria.
So
also
you
killed
now
quite a
want me
number.
to turn this discussion to a dietary...
No, it's an interesting fact.
Do we still have
You
lions
want me
in
to
the
discuss
Tsavo?
food preferences?
Do we still
There
have
was
food?
quite a number of people who died building that railway.
A number of people, more people have died in this country by the government diverting funds that are intended for certain things to
There
other
we go.
uses. Yes.
Then lions.
Yes, and I'm avoiding this line of discussion because that's not what I want to look at this morning.
Today you're being very positive about this.
Because there are positive things that you must look at. Every time I say the negative things and the question is asked, what do you do? That's the doing I am doing now. I'm saying, if you look at the positive, you'll start with what was purposed. Then you can understand where we missed it. So it then becomes a little easier to steer back to what was intended in the first place. That's what I'm trying to do.
Right.
2000
0719-012-600. I'm opening up the phone lines now. You can join in this conversation. 0719-012-600. And of course, then we'll come in and Jerry will ask about the number of people who died. I don't know, who were eaten by lions, who died out of malaria. How many mosquitoes have benefited out of the Lunatic
Really?
Express? How many lions did that? Good morning. It's 13 minutes to 9 o'clock.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
2,493 workers died during the construction of the railway. That's the Lunatic Express. 2,000, almost 2,500 between the years of 1895 and 1903. So in 8 years, 2,500 people died. Just an interesting fact.
No, it's just point of information. I thought so there was a point somewhere, like, it wasn't as much.
No,
as
it's well
3
known, the
billion.
man-eating lions and Savo and so on. So it's a well-known sort of story, anecdote.
How do we ensure that this project then lives up to its vision?
Its vision.
And this is delivering for the country fast, not waiting for it to take 20 years for it to materialize. For example, if you're looking about now, it ends at Suswa, right? So Suswa, we're going to have an inland container depot, and of course, we are thinking about, we're hoping that it's going to extend all the way to Uganda, because the Ugandan side, they've already started preparing for the arrival of our SGR on their end. So if we look at Suswa, for example, are we prepared right now to start capitalizing on this particular railway that has arrived?
By capitalizing, what do you mean, Eric?
So in Suswa, where it ends, where it terminates, so there's going to be passenger transport,
in
of
Suswa,
course, and there's going to be good transport.
Where it's currently terminated.
Currently terminating, where there's a terminus for now, right?
Yes.
So the idea is to have an inland container depot set up there. We knew this when we started the construction of the railway. How many years ago? We knew that we were going to have an inland container depot in Suswa.
Did we?
That was their plan.
Okay, carry on.
There's going to be an inland container depot in Suswa.
Okay.
The railway has actually reached Suswa, but there's no inland container depot. This is the time when it's starting to build the inland container depot. How about that for visionary?
Maybe they know what they're doing, though.
Yeah, maybe they do, and maybe the moon is made of cheese. Yes. The thing is this, Eric, if you look at government projects, if you notice, I have not mentioned the Lamu port,
which is about to be launched.
Of course, it's been about to be launched
for a while.
Years.
Yeah,
it's complete.
The president was supposed to launch the Kisumu port, and he's been about to launch it for quite some time.
We're waiting for the Coast Guard.
Yeah.
You asked an interesting question, Eric, because it's important that we do actually benefit from this, especially the socioeconomic aspect in terms of socioeconomic activity around these towns, and the train should enhance or encourage. And the way to go about this, I think, perhaps, is maybe incentivize different schemes in different areas. So, for instance, we've seen with Konza City, it becoming a city. So it comes down maybe to even town planning and so on, where some cities are well known for certain activities, and it will bring that crowd in. So Konza City is set out to be a technology sort of hub, or it's our Silicon Valley, isn't it? So if you imagine with different stops, let's say on the SGR to Mombasa, what was the one I liked? Miasenyi. So we decide Miasenyi can be about, schools, and the government incentivizes people to build boarding schools around that area, and incentivizes by sort of tax cuts and so on. So if the government had such initiatives, then we would see the sort of socio-economic benefit that would be looking to get from something like this, from the SGR.
Every government project begins with the conception and planning, all. Okay? And the things that we're discussing here are looked at in fine details, tooth-comb details by experts, people who honestly and genuinely know how to go about these things. That's not, it's never where the problem is, ever.
It's implementation.
Yes. It never is.
So do you think they've come up with ideas such as this, whereby let's actually designate the different train stations to certain activities and encourage that activity as government with whether it's tax cuts or build an infrastructure that will further support those activities?
I believe they do, because this isn't the first time a railway is being built, and this is the first time that they've seen the benefits of what a railway can do. It's not. So this one they don't have to guess. The first time you do it, you have to. This one you don't.
I think they're kind of waiting for things to happen organically. They know the business community.
I mean, to the point that we don't even have we don't have the ICD set up at Suswa, for example, and that was one of the main reasons why
it was going to Suswa.
Why it was going to Suswa.
Let's hear from Solomon. Solomon is calling from Mombasa, and he's always very passionate when you talk about SGR and the railway. Good morning, Solomon.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Solomon.
Yes, Jerry, first thing, Miasenyi was built because of travel, and yes, like 2 weeks ago, I was counting how much I've used on transport for SGR. I've used almost over 100,000. And I'm very passionate about what the government did about SGR. One thing is, a long time ago, I used to travel by bus. And sometimes I used to look how mothers and kids, 1 year old, maybe 1 month old baby, a mother is carrying. But this SGR tried to simplify the whole thing. Yeah. Because you find kids, they play around the SGR, they are comfortable. Even but it goes the an average speed of 100 kilometers per hour, and that speed is okay, I believe, with any passenger. Because even in our driving, at least it goes to 80 to around 100. And one thing about SGR, all these stations, they came to open up our country when it comes to business. And for example, the stations that we have in Mombasa and Meritini, honestly, it has opened that place widely.
Which station?
The terminals at Meritina.
Oh, okay.
At Meritini. People have started building residential houses, borders are being constructed. If you go now to Miasenyi, it's basically because of travel.
Right.
And majority of tourists are actually using the SGR because of once they get dropped at Savo, it's very easy for them, maybe the hotel tours vehicles, they can easily pick up from that station. That is one. For example, I usually go to Voi. Voi, I can set up a meeting today, maybe at around 11. I'll change the SGR by around 8. By 10, I'll be there. I do my meeting, and I go back by the train that is coming from Nairobi by around 1.
So
and you see, I'll go do my meeting, and it will cost me less than 500 shillings. If I was using it by means of road, it will cost me not less than 1,000 shillings. Because going is around 500 or 600, then I come back with the same amount. And you see, time convenience.
And of course, it's safer than the roads.
Yes, at least for now, because I've always driven in Mombasa Road, the road is okay, by the way, no potholes. But now the problem, you find accident all over the road. Tankers, like last week, there was a tanker that was on fire, like for 2 days in the middle of the road, you see. So convenience is very key, because if, for example, I plan to go to Nairobi today, if I use the SGR, I'll know by 2 p.m. I'll be in Nairobi. If I use by bus, I'm not even sure if
You don't know what time you'll arrive.
He doesn't even know if he'll arrive, he says.
For example, if I go to see my parents back in Kiambu, when I travel by bus, my mother will still call me at 10, are you okay? At 11, or where have you reached? At around 2 a.m., have you reached Mutito? Because they are such of our roads. But with the SGR, he'll call me the following day, because he's very sure the accident is minimal. And secondly,
so it's much safer.
Yeah, it's much safer. And especially if you're a mother with kids, I know how hectic it is to travel with babies on a bus.
Absolutely.
But vis-a-vis the SGR, trust me, mtoto amejikojolea after that kid in the bus, there hakuna hizo room kama hizo. Yeah?
Thank you, Solomon.
Yes. Then secondly,
let me bring in Robert, who's calling in from Kinango in Kwale. Robert, good morning.
Good morning, Eric.
Welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank you so much. First, I appreciate the program. I've been listening to you since morning about the academic works and about the SGR.
Yes. What do you think about the SGR?
The SGR, as you say, is visionary. And Kenyans, we like things that give instant feedback, And the lunatic one was built 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago, and it served Kenya for a long time.
123 years.
The question we should ask ourselves, what is the SDR in 100 years to come? What's the future of SDR? What will it be? What's the impact? Recently, there was a scenario where Mombasa residents were complaining of having a negative economic impact.
Yep.
Yeah, the economic impact was it's being felt actually. But the problem is the government didn't put in place the recovery mode of the recovery mechanisms from switching people from reliance on the road network to the SDR network.
What sort
that
of
brings a big question.
What sort of mechanisms could they have put in place? What would you suggest?
I've just listened very well to the member of panel saying that Miasenyi, which is just next to me here, is a very good place for economic zone, can be used as economic zone to expand schools, to give at least
incentive
space for those people. Yeah, for those people who like to develop and bring schools. We have schools in Nairobi. People taking their children to a boarding school in Nairobi, which they will see in 3 months' time. The school is not doing anything in Nairobi. If we isolate the school along a railway line, along SDR, it means when you come to pick your child with the SDR, you'll still see him or her in the next 3 months after school. So if people are locked somewhere in Nairobi, why can't we use the space that's available somewhere?
Sure. You were talking about the government having mechanisms to absorb the fallout from the SGR.
The economy, the local economy of Mombasa.
And people who were in the transport business, road transport business. What sort of mechanisms could the government have put in place to absorb that?
Okay, the government would have diversified the economic... first, the government has a way of engaging the community and knowing very well how do you make money out of the road network. Then, how can we switch that to the SGR network?
Right.
So that when we withdraw you from the road, we don't cry about the SGR. That is like in the people along this highway. What I can say is they depend entirely on selling small goods, those the drinks and hotels, accommodation. Let's say it's all about hospitality. Yeah, it's hospitality. So how can we expand the Miasenyi camp to accommodate a number of locals? Can you come and sell your stuff around Miasenyi? How can we bring investors to Miasenyi? How can we bring passengers to Miasenyi? So that when the passengers come, you sell your goods to them, they sleep in your hotel. Rather than relying on the road network. Another issue is, another issue is when the road network, when the SGR was being implemented, we were decongesting Mombasa Road. But now there is another program which is coming of expanding Mombasa Road. Why did we have these two railway lines or this transport system along each other? We have the old railway network, we have the Mombasa Road, we have the SGR running parallel to Nairobi.
Indeed.
We have a lot of space in Kenya. If they were buying land, why could they just choose another route to nowhere, like we have the Suswa?
Robert, thank you very much for your contribution. Asante sana. The numbers to call this morning, 0719-012-600. That's 0719-012-600. SGR Visionary Project. Is it holistically visionary as well? It's 9 o'clock. Good morning. Let's take a look at traffic.
Traffic.
Looking at a better situation now coming off Mombasa Road, where traffic was bumper to bumper just about 20 minutes ago. But yes, much better now, trying to get into the city centre. Jogo Road to Lunga Lunga Road, you get a diversion there because of the road construction that is happening coming out of the industrial area. And so that is what is causing your traffic on that side of the road this morning. All right, let's look at Thika Road, where we did have a bumper to bumper situation earlier. It is slow moving from a survey, but the service lane will save you quite a number of minutes. And Kiambu Road is backed up, but that is now causing a problem from Muthaiga to Pangani. All right, apart from that, we still do have Mombasa Road, like I said, just after Syokimau is still really backed up. But apart from that, everything else looking more or less smooth. Don't forget, you can share with us what you see that we should know. 0719 012 600.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have Jerry Thorne, lawyer, political strategist, an insider in the corridors of power, ready to take on any side of the debate with her signature eloquence and grit. C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
39. Good morning, and thank you for tuning in to the Spice FM this morning. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room. Well, we are talking about SGR. It's a visionary project.
It is. You see, the process
so
of...
So you saying?
Yeah, so I say. The process of actually conceiving a project and planning it, that is visionary. You see, the complaints have been raised about the costs, and which have been mitigated by people saying, well, there's the issue of bridges which were built. Perhaps I should give it perspective. The old railway went through hills. It chose probably scenic, very delightful scenery to look at, but it didn't consider convenience. One of the things that the SGR did to ensure that they could maintain the speeds that they were talking about, they looked at terrain, and to achieve this, you have to build bridges. They're not going through any mountain, across any mountain, round. They're not doing any of that. You look at the space, you say, no. The best thing to do here is build a bridge. This isn't the first time. People have done these sort of things for even longer distances than this one of ours. People have crossed body waters with kilometers of bridges to do the same thing, whereas they've always had the opportunity of going around that water body. Now, that is conception. That is visionary. Efficiency being brought about by speed. Now, let's talk about the current problem we have, because there have been demonstrations in Mombasa. Rightfully so. People who own CFSs have complained. They have this particular establishments which were intended to keep containers. Now they're empty. There's nothing that they can do. They're losing money. Yes, they are. But the question that I am asking myself, are you saying that the people who came up with this idea had not foreseen this? And what exactly are we dealing with here? Are we dealing with an idea that is new and is changing the lives of people in ways they haven't anticipated? Or are we saying that there is no option? The only option available to certain businessmen was this. And now that this has come about, they are doomed to penury. They will suffer poverty and die poor in the days to come. When we built the oil pipeline from Mombasa, similar complaints were made. But it was against a backdrop of oil being transported by tankers. The expenses we incurred in repairing and maintaining our roads was horrendous. But since we built the pipeline, have people who transport oil by tankers gone out of business? The answer is no. Have the business increased? The answer is yes. Why? There's something in terms of transportation and logistics. They call it first mile and second mile, where it is you begin from tertiary position and the end. With a pipeline, they were headquartered. You'd find a pipeline maybe in Mombasa, Kisumu, Nairobi, pipeline. Somewhere a depot, somewhere where the oil reaches and from where you can actually collect the oil to take it, inland and other places. Now, does it therefore mean that other people who prior to that could not do the business could? The answer is yes. So how can this not also apply to containers? If the containers come by railway, and if the numbers that were in Mombasa, when they get to Nairobi, anywhere else those containers are supposed to go to, there is no rail to take them.
Take them there.
None whatsoever. So there is opportunity for the same lorry transportation.
To move to Nairobi?
Yes, it's business. It's business. If they could move to Mombasa, from Mombasa to
their livelihoods
Malaba.
Are in Mombasa.
Yes, they are. There's a point I'm making here. If the business now seems to be centered in a place, it means that business has expanded to that place, but doesn't mean the business has vanished. The railway doesn't get to Uganda, so you can still get that container and take it to Uganda.
So there's still an opportunity, even with what we see there, there's still an opportunity.
Yes, you just don't have to, you will not be getting it from Mombasa.
But what we're asking them to do essentially is that, because we have a lot of them with businesses domiciled in Mombasa, so essentially what you'd be asking them to do is pick up and start off from Suswa, as it were. Because then we're saying that we would move, or we're saying establish a business in Suswa.
If you're if you're a business person and you want to do business,
you'll seek opportunity where it is.
Thank you very much.
But then the other people who benefit from this, let's say the people who cook, the people who cook from this,
petrol
the petrol stations,
people who sell tires.
We're talking about kiosks,
boarding and lodging
You're telling somebody to go and open a kiosk in Suswa.
You are assuming that the only transportation that used lorries was containers. That is the assumption. It is not true.
Primarily.
Not primarily.
So
the food that is eaten in that part of the country is transported from this part of the country, which is they call upcountry, Bara, up there. And it isn't 2 or 3 lorries. There are many lorries. Not everything that gets to the port of Mombasa is actually transported by container also. Remember, the segment is containers.
You can't run away from the fact that the SGR was disruptive to the transport system. You can put it any which way and say there's other lorries and so on, but it was disruptive.
That's what you are saying. I am trying to forward an argument that it's been made to feel as though with that declaration, other businesses were killed, and I'm saying not so.
Other businesses were killed. People have called in. Somebody had a tire company that used to service the trucks that were carrying these containers, and he's called in. You have people who are selling things on the roadside. They've called in themselves. They're telling us. They're on the ground.
The lodges, in fact, who was it that just called it?
Solomon.
And Robert. Solomon and Robert were saying, so you've got all these accommodation services along the road, and the main people who are servicing this are the truck drivers.
And somebody came up with a solution. He said there should have been mechanisms in place, a safety net, to absorb this fallout and sort of the business people, in terms of maybe take them to, what's the station called? Isimiaka.
Yeah, okay, sure, go with it.
Miasenyi. But remember, Jerry, Miasenyi, you talked about how many people were killed by the lions? Miasenyi is in the Savo. All right? It's in the Savo. It's actually in the park. So setting up schools there as well.
There's land around. It's not just the Savo.
When we stopped using the escarpment road that goes right through Naivasha and built the road that went through Limuru, Naivasha virtually died as a town because it was dependent on
that traffic.
Yes. Then the flower farms came up. Not only was it revived and revamped, it changed completely. That industry seems to be a bit troubled now. What are people going to do? This gentleman talked about getting people to a railway station. When you're in traffic in Nairobi, those people who sell you peanuts and sweets and lollipops and handkerchiefs and hats, does anybody tell them to come there? No. They understand. People will move slowly in traffic. There are things people sometimes need. People who are business-minded seek opportunities. This really is my point. Whenever you bring change of the nature that was brought about by SGR, it is going to be disruptive. There's no question about it.
Well, I think with any change, especially when you're looking at change that's going to propel you in a forward, trajectory, I think those are things that we should expect. And we should resist change. The government initially resist it, because what it does is that it topples your comfortability. And that is a normal reaction to something like that. I've been comfortable. I've been able to make money by things happening in this particular fashion. Something comes and basically slices through. Of course I'm going to resist it, because I don't want to have to look for another option at this time. I've entered into a rhythm that works for me as a business person. It doesn't want to be disruptive. But what we're saying is that they have a duty to development, of course. And so they're
not just development, but in terms of creating a conducive business environment. So what they're doing here is actually the antithesis of that. They're taking that away. So they should have played a bigger role in making sure there was some sort of safety net for these guys who are going to lose out. I'm not saying they shouldn't have done the SGR. Of course, things are disruptive. Technology grows. There's people who used to push carts, and cars came and took over their jobs and so on. So people do have to move on. But the government should have played a bigger role. I think the transport sector is the biggest employer in the country in terms of...
So horse-drawn carriages are horses complaining. And they lost the opportunity.
No. Biggest employer in terms of?
As a sector.
No, the government is the
transport
employer.
After government, the transport sector employs the most people in the country. Now, with that in mind, the fact that the government didn't look to put any mechanisms in place to absorb all those, let's say, job losses, the businesses, it becomes dangerous, because what happens is when people don't have jobs, they don't have money, they can't feed their families, they turn to crime. So these are some of the consequences of the government not acting, and I think it was imperative that the government did act and just put in measures and get people to participate and see what they come up with. But they should have come up with something, or they should have been more involved and more active in making sure that they
should have thought ahead.
Absolutely.
0719-012-600. James is calling in from Karen. Good morning, James.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How is everyone?
Fine, thank you.
Fine.
It's been a long time.
Since?
Yes,
Where
it
have you
has.
been?
It's been away.
You've been
I
away?
went to Rwanda, a place called Gisenyi,
Uh-huh.
and it's a long drive.
In
So
the
when you
hills.
talk about railway. Imagine if I was seated somewhere in a train, I would have enjoyed my ride better than driving all the way. Now, City is very right today. And City, I agree with you 100%.
Thank you very much.
That
you are a visionary.
Yes, SGR was visionary. I've heard about the previous caller trying to ridicule us trying to expand the road, and you have a railway. I even laughed at him because you cannot ridicule such a project. You know, the thing is, when we started doing the SGR, our media, everything, they focused on the corruption side. But if you go to the documentary, now SGR, if you don't know, is in the category of mega structure. And they have a documentary with 3 episodes of how it was done. If you
When is it showing? I'd love to see that.
just go into YouTube, you'll find it.
All right.
If you look at it, you come to love it. At some point, you can shed tears of joy. Seeing our country going to that level. I went to Suswa just the other day. And there's something even as we're supposed to learn. Even the leaders who come from Suswa, they're supposed to see those projects that are being done by the Chinese. Imagine where roads were not passable, and now the Chinese have come with a very innovative thing. Like, they only use the volcanic ash to rehabilitate those rural areas. You can just imagine, just get the volcanic ash down there at Logonaut, you pour it along the road, you grade it, you have Aurora, and it's even better than the tarmac. You cannot believe it. You're not buying these things.
Can it withstand the rains?
Yes, it can.
These heavy rains?
It actually waterproofs the road.
Okay.
It's all weather. You cannot believe it. Now, if you hear some people demonstrating in Mombasa that SGR is killing their business because their yard were flooded with containers, I would like to remind them, the client who used to stock the containers in your yards are the same client using the SGR. So it means you are not having an alternative. They needed somebody who is so efficient and saving their money. You talk about roads, somebody is crying is not selling tires. Remember, the same client is happy somewhere, your tires are not wearing out so fast. So you're still saving some.
Where did you say you're calling from?
He's in Karen.
Oh, you're in Karen.
Yes.
So you don't think that there's been any sort of fallout from the SGR in the business community who are involved in transport?
Even in those early days when the people are being eaten by lions in Savo, their families used to cry a lot. Now when you're enjoying even those roads, old trains.
So the sacrifice was worth it?
We forget there are people who are eaten by lions and their families cried a lot for us
Small
to enjoy.
Sacrifice.
They were sacrifice. And you focus on the sacrifice side. If you focus on the sacrifice side, you come to love the essence that we are supposed to take care of the SGR. Because there are people sacrificed for us to live well. Sometimes back I saw something going on and TVs and everything that the SGR employees were being harassed and everything. There's corporal punishment and everything. Whoever did the SGR was not doing it to please us. It was not being done to serve us today and today only. It's for the future.
So there should be corporal punishment?
There should be discipline. We have to
put in line.
Grown-ups should be beaten?
We are going to hand you over a project that is going to run in this country for the next over 100 years. You have to be disciplined out from the word go. Sometimes you don't have to be so soft.
So what you're saying is that...
Let people cry, but
James,
are people...
What do you do, James?
I told you I do all kind of things. Now I'm somewhere
Oh, you're a jack of all trades.
This is a man who goes to Machakos.
No, he's really
Nairobi,
hardcore.
goes to Gisenyi. This is...
Are you in business?
Kenyan.
Yes.
Clearly not the transport business in Mombasa.
I wish even one day I would meet you on the ground and you see what I do. Because
once you sit down and cry, nobody will come to your rescue. You have to work.
So what we're saying essentially that you agree with the assertion then that, you know, with the new SGR, with the new destination, that people should stop crying but actually get up and say, one opportunity lost, but here's another chance for another opportunity to be found and continue my business.
So many opportunities created. You see, one rich guy is crying. He's not doing the business of transporting containers, is not doing well. But remember, you are benefiting individually. Your bank account has billions of money, and your immediate neighbor is sleeping hungry because you cannot coverage everything. You have taken everything. Now
but
you have come to
this individual.
We are balancing. You are balancing.
No. This individual employs people. You don't know if he's sort of the breadwinner in a large family, extended family, but he definitely employs people.
Who are crying. It's the employer who is crying. Why is he crying?
James,
don't be so soft. Sometimes you need to close your eyes. Take people brutally to the right direction instead of babysitting them to the wrong direction.
James, you sound like you're the candidate that Jerry has been looking for.
Benevolent dictator.
She has been looking for a benevolent dictator. I think you two should actually hook up, have a talk.
I think in Kenya we need that. We need a dictator.
She can actually package you so well and communicate so well that people will actually pick you as our leader. Thank you very much, James. Have a good day.
You're most welcome. Have a good day too.
Thanks, James.
Sounds like a very patriotic fella, very emotive about the SGR, but very hardcore too, and very little sympathy for those who might have been negatively affected by the SGR in terms of business.
You're saying there's
opportunity. Just crying
us for no reason. Get over it.
Yeah, let's move on. Keep other opportunities that have been born as a result of this.
Remember that the railway in this country actually died. Remember?
True. As a source of transport,
died.
Also transportation of goods,
died.
Humans,
died.
All right.
It stopped being an employer. It stopped transporting goods.
It's not so dead, City. It
It died. I'm talking about past tense.
Kenya Railways operates. LBR is transporting some stuff from
where to where?
From Mombasa, taking them all the way to.
Where? Did they retain that?
No, wait.
The train to Mombasa.
The
passenger train to Mombasa.
Exactly what happened.
When you are on the SGR, you'll actually see
you do see one or two.
Railway, and you'll see the train. And what is it? Transporting goods
from where?
From
where to where?
From Mombasa.
With what frequency? And what efficiency?
No.
So speed is important.
Yes.
It's not
earlier you said speed wasn't important.
The volume of business that Kenya Railway does, if it met any economic threshold, SGR would not have been needed.
Well, we accepted that SGR wasn't needed. We could have just sorted out that railway.
It's the same way that we look at road transportation. It is an option. Okay? Now, when I say it died, what it was is not what it is. It was the monopoly that ran railway business. It doesn't anymore. So for all intents and purposes, it died.
So what new opportunities does the SGR bring for those who were previously these CFS owners and sort of these people who had hotels in terms of accommodation?
Ask yourself how old
petrol
the
stations.
The CFS business has been in Kenya. And ask yourself what it is that the expansion of the so-called road business in this country for transportation of human beings, it didn't increase because the railway existed. It increased because the roads were better.
And the population grew.
Yes, exactly. The population still keeps growing. All the eateries that someone is speaking about expanded along the Mombasa road because there were more buses. And that competition was wonderful because the buses got more and more comfortable. It didn't hamper people using the railway. It didn't hamper transportation by the railway. The same will happen with the SGR. The noise is being made now, yes, because of these changes. But there'll be people who will still prefer.
You call them changes, but to some people, these are whole livelihoods that have been destroyed.
That's what disruption
You don't think the government had any duty whatsoever to absorb this?
If I'm to go by the argument you proffered all along, that's not the government's job. The government's job is to provide opportunities.
To create a conducive environment. So when you go against that,
but you see now with that,
which is what they've done.
With that, what has happened essentially in this case is that yes, there's development that has taken place and there has been a disruption. However, there has been a creation of said conducive environment. It just has happened in another area.
You know,
there's also been a disruption of a conducive environment.
No, as was containerization. These things are not 100, not even 50 years old. With every new aspect of business taking the force, changes come about, and in many cases,
and opportunities emerge,
and they're disruptive.
So this is disruptive development.
This is just Another example in modern times when a new opportunity arises and the consequences.
And they'll be okay.
They will be fine. They're businessmen. They'll be
they
fine.
could turn to crime.
That is also a business.
Online writing.
Online writing.
They're going to academic writing, right? The conversation this morning has been heated. 0719-012-600. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room. We've been talking about SGR. City Muga has told us that SGR is actually a visionary project. And the advice is the businessmen, well, adopt. You'll see what happens. Just move on with the times. Good morning. It's 20 minutes after 9.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
87.9 Mombasa, Kisumu 102.5, 96.0 in Nakuru, that includes Suswa, 96.7 in Eldoret,
Mornings
90.9
done
in
right.
Nyeri,
94.4 Spice FM,
We live
Nairobi.
stream from Nairobi to the world on Facebook, Spice FM KE, YouTube, Spice FM KE, and as well as our website, www.spicefm.co.ke. Well, our Twitter handle is Spice FM KE, and our hashtag today and every day, every morning is The Situation Room. Now, let's look at the headline on the Standard today. Court shut down as cash crisis bites. An empty court in Nakuru yesterday after judges adjourned their sittings due to lack of funding. And the story here is talking about more than 15,000 cases suspended indefinitely across the country as the judiciary runs out of money for basic operations amid budget war with the Treasury. Now, what is this budget war? The budget war is that the Treasury, the National Treasury, recently announced some austerity measures, said people in the national government, we are going to have to adjust some things. No more buying of flowers, reduce your travel abroad and around the country, hold your meetings in the office, don't go to hotels, stop paying for hotels, meetings in hotels. And also they went to the courts and they told the courts, look, we are cutting your budget by 50%. So there's a 50% budget cut to the judiciary. And the judiciary is already announcing what that means to them by suspending sittings in various cases. So we have, for example, the Employment and Labor Relations Court has written to all advocates and litigants, kindly take notice that due to the current judiciary budget cuts, the Employment and Labor Relations Court will be sitting in Mombasa during the period Monday 28th October to Friday the 1st of November and not in Malindi as earlier scheduled. So you're told if you had a case in Malindi, please transport yourself to Mombasa. The other court is the cancellation of sittings at the National Environment Tribunal. The National Environment Tribunal says because of the 50% budget cut, we are unable to conduct our sittings from October to December 2019. This is in reference to a memo from the Chief Registrar of the Judiciary dated Wednesday 9th. The other court here is the Civil Aviation Administration Review Tribunal. The National Civil Aviation Administration Review Tribunal says, you know what, we are not going to have sittings. What this means is that there are people who were relying on the outcome of these proceedings in court to make decisions, business decisions, life decisions. Those ones have been suspended basically by what has happened from the National Treasury. Let's also look at what the other impact of these budget cuts have been. We've seen the austerity measures in government. Before even this, we knew that we had seen how the government was operating. So there's a push back and forth with the county governments and money not going to the counties as it's supposed to, when it's supposed to. And what does that mean? It means that the people who are working in those county governments are not getting their salaries on time, and people who have supplied goods and services to the county governments are not getting paid. And this is something that has been said over and over and over again. If you look at the Treasury, the National Treasury, it has had the same officers at the top since 2013 until earlier this year. Not earlier this year, but well, a couple of months ago. And now we have a change at the Treasury. And I'm saying, if you look at how that Treasury has managed our finances, it basically exposes them to what they've been doing or not doing. And I'm saying, let's just go into the National Treasury and overhaul all officers from there. They have done a bad job, pure and simple.
Let's look at the judiciary and the cuts there. Austerity measures, of course, there's loans to be repaid. We know that as a country we're in debt. But we were overspending when we talk about buying flowers for government and the sort of trips that government officials were making. It was a serious budget and the belts needed to be tightened. But let's look at the judiciary. When they talk about having...
No, carry on with the flowers. Yes. Flowers.
And teas and mandazis.
Flowers.
Absolutely, it adds up.
Flowers.
Yeah.
Okay. Carry on.
Let's talk about...
Is that not the case? Hasn't Treasury cut the budget for flowers for government?
The budget for flowers.
It's facetious.
And such
Flowers.
Flowers.
Compared to
you don't know how much they spend on flowers for every single government office and so on.
How much they spend
out of a 3 trillion shilling budget.
Flowers.
Every
little helps. You count the pennies.
Every little penny helps.
Flowers.
Let's look at the judiciary.
The many drops in the ocean that make the big body of water, they say. Abby?
And with the judiciary, this notion that they've had to suspend, is it 15,000 cases?
Yes.
So was it because of budgetary issues that they were not doing their job, or is it actually that the judiciary is incompetent and there were cases that were being suspended anyway? Do you see what I mean? Because
beautiful question. Yes. No, seriously, 15,000 cases.
And so suddenly, because there's no money in the coffers, now suddenly 15,000. Look, I would understand if the number was lower, but 15,000 cases, suddenly these cases cannot be attended to. So there is no capacity because there's no money, or there is no will, or there's really mediocrity when it comes to getting the job done. Because then what is going to happen? 15,000 cases, whether they be civil, criminal, whatever cases we are looking at, we don't know the details of just how many, I'm sure.
When a tribunal is supposed to move to Malindi for a certain
is
week,
not a joke.
And the tribunal has not moved to Malindi in a certain week. You look at the cases in Malindi, there's an impact on the cases in Malindi. And why is the tribunal not able to move to Malindi in that week? They don't have money.
Is it because of the money that they've not been able to do their job?
What
in terms of moving about?
Is actually absolutely true. But let's look at it against the backdrop of cases where these fundings had not been cut. We had the same stories.
Absolutely. And they do have money. The budget was only cut by 50%. They've still got the other 50% to go to Malindi.
Only 50%.
Yes.
I'm not a great fan of the judiciary,
only
to be
50%. Look, the thing is, so this is one of the impacts. So 50% of a budget cut would have an impact, definitely, right? And not just on buying flowers for judges or fueling.
Well, maybe the judges' salaries can go down.
Okay, let's take a couple of steps back. These cuts were made within, I'm assuming, reason. Okay, and obviously the austerity measures that were being put in place at government level, and saying, look, across the board, and we cannot continue just having it where, yes, we understand that it's an independent, almost autonomous body, the judiciary, and we're saying that, all right, we're not going to, but in this case, we've got to cut across board, and the time for the axe to fall on the judiciary also is now. The reasons why is that we just don't have money as a government, right? And across the board, everybody has got to feel the pinch.
Yes.
It is not just with you that this cut is being made.
Yes.
So now basically you're saying that even with this 50%, we absolutely cannot do our job. So what is happening essentially is that there's almost a go slow in the judiciary and nothing is going to happen. And so they're essentially saying until you give us this money back is when we'll be able to work.
There's always been a go slow. I'm looking at the paper you were looking at, Eric.
There are two cases. Yeah. There's the case of how the judiciary is reacting to this. But there's a bigger issue. Why are we having budget cuts? Why? Where is our money?
We've eaten all the money.
Exactly. And that's why I'm focusing on the
money
treasury.
is paying back the debts.
But
I want to look at
the debts for the money that we ate.
I want to look at this court case, the standard.
Are we saying that the people at the National Treasury were so incompetent that they were not thinking of we're going to have to pay back debts in 2019?
No, they knew, and they knew they would have
this is it. So
austerity measures in place to do so.
Was it their plan that they were going to get to a point and they say, cut everything by 50%? Why had you doubled it in the first place? Why weren't you operating on the 50% from the beginning?
And by the time they made a budget cut,
why weren't you living within your means?
By the time they made a budget cut, they also realized that the same judiciary could operate on that 50%. I don't think they did anything unrealistic in terms of their cut. They realized that you can operate on that 50%. You can. Why was it inflated in the first place?
This is the same judiciary that is acting, it's the bottleneck in the fight against corruption. We could actually be collecting more money and stopping the corruption if the judiciary worked with us.
Treasury.
If
Yes.
no, not at the National Treasury.
No. Even that, yes.
Even there.
Yeah,
But
even there,
we've
yes.
seen the judiciary actually make it so difficult in terms of the legal framework for fighting corruption, whereby they deem evidence to be inadmissible. And this is the only way we're going to get these people and, bring them to the book. And the judiciary hasn't played ball. So good for them.
Good for who? Good for the judiciary?
Yeah.
How about the 15,000 cases?
Well, do we know how many cases
How
there
about the
were
litigants?
before they
That's
announced
that's
this?
nonsense.
How many cases?
How
So
about-
essentially,
how
what was
about the
happening
litigants?
before the budget cuts came in place, there were 15,000 cases that they were not
so
dealing
let's
with
say
anyway. Let
30,000
them do
people.
their work, I beg.
Nduoko plus 29,000
No, this
others
is-
are affected by this.
But the
This is
judiciary
the point.
is making a
Eric,
ball out of
making
it.
it.
this is a bit unfortunate, but the judiciary are not going to get many sympathizers.
Oh,
No,
I
they're
am not
not.
sympathizing with the judiciary either. 27 minutes to 10 o'clock.
Traffic.
All right, still the problem in Westlands on Waiaki. Exams are starting today, and exam papers are actually being dispatched from that area, and that's why we see the traffic that we do coming out of Westlands. All right, Langata Road and Bagavi Way seem to have an issue right about now, and there's a tussle to be able to get ahead, and that is causing some traffic. Other than that, other parts of the city seem to be flowing smoothly. Mombasa Road still has a bit of an issue with bumper-to-bumper traffic now heading towards the Nyayo Stadium roundabout. But apart from that, it's hunky-dory at about 9:30. 0719012 in case you do see something else that we need to share, and we will.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM.
So the standard headlines: courts shut down as cash crisis bites. And then you've got an empty court there. That's the picture. And a little caption that says, an empty courtroom in Nakuru yesterday after judges adjourned their sittings due to a lack of funding. I don't see the correlation there.
Neither do I.
What is the money used for them to attend a court session?
Why have
what
they
money
adjourned
do they
their
need?
sitting?
What money do they need
To
for a
sit
sitting?
down there?
Yeah. What money do they need?
Other ministries have also had these cuts. Have they shut down?
So
don't understand.
listen.
Maybe you can help us by telling us.
The judiciary
what
got a budget cut of 3 billion shillings. Other government agencies got a budget cut of 131 billion shillings from different government agencies. So the other government agencies 131 billion, the judiciary 3 billion. The judiciary had actually requested in this budget cycle 14 billion, but Parliament allocated them 31.2
And now you see maybe why
Eric,
the new judges weren't being appointed.
Yes, Eric, they requested 31 billion.
They were allocated 14, right?
But this
and now that
debate,
14 has been cut by half.
Eric, not half, by just that 14 they reduced
50% is half.
They reduced by 3 billion.
3 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, basic arithmetic, surely. Even if you're using a binary system, come on.
But these were the people, they wanted more judges.
It's for operations. You see, the other money, it goes into salaries and all. We're talking about for operations.
Eric, you know the debate that arises from this? The same judiciary has been asked in the past, this money we give you, what do you actually do with it?
No, that's the question.
They haven't been able to respond to
Answer
that question.
till now.
Their response has been asking for more money.
And in
They've
this case, they
opened up
wanted
a
to
few
hire
courts
more.
under
They
Maraga.
wanted to
They've
hire
opened up-
more judges at the
Just
same
the
time.
other day.
Hire more judges. If we take this specific case of this court sitting in Nakuru, which didn't sit, what is it that they need money for to sit? What do they need money, like cash?
Or
like
maybe
the
it
way
was
you-
in protest
petty
that
cash?
they adjourned
Or-
the sittings.
I don't understand.
Maybe it was in protest.
But they said they couldn't sit because of budget cuts. So there's normally money that they use to sit
Maybe
day
they sit
on,
on the
day in,
money.
day
I
out.
think we're in the process of seeing a new wave of what you call judicial misconduct.
Honestly. No, let's
Because
just be
this is now
serious.
subverting the very law that they're supposed to protect.
So then what happens to those cases that we're talking about now? They decided they wouldn't sit, and this is a ripple that's happening
But how can
all
they
across
sit
the
when they
country.
don't have money?
Justice on trial, they're
What
calling
are
it.
they doing? What are they using it to?
So
It's
when-
a
when-
basic question I'm trying
When
to
we've
get an
had
answer for.
situations where employees in the county system and the council system before them missing salaries for 6 months, and then on the 7th month they go on strike. Now, how are they managing to go to work?
How did they get to work?
Did they stop working? No, they stopped working when they said, look, guys, this is a bit much. We're now not going to work because of
this. And it says the same judicial system, the same high court who would deem such strikes illegal, and they would sit on those because cases and deem such illegal. Now here are cases where people either will be proven innocent or guilty. Here are cases where businesses would either continue or stop. Here are cases where somebody's life is hanging in the balance.
We have had reforms in the judiciary for a while. Before you come into that,
hold on, please listen to this. It's hilarious. Also suspended indefinitely is the service week, which judges and magistrates use to speed up hearing of cases to clear backlog. Why have they decided to suspend that?
Because they can't manage it.
They don't have money.
What do you mean?
The service week, where does the service week happen? Not just in the courts. They actually set up more courts. They set up more, they do this at... Okay.
When was the last
time? They're throwing a tantrum and they're behaving like a toddler.
Of course they're throwing a tantrum.
When was the last time?
And the point is, why is it that you're only coming to us and taking and doing a whole 50% budget cut to an arm of government, and look at the other two arms of government? Have you done the same? Is it correspondent? Let's look at what happened in the judiciary before you come in, City, because I was actually trying to make that point before. What have we done in the judiciary in the last 10 years? We've tried to expand our judiciary, open up new courts, increase our services. So we have more judges hired, right? This is what we've been trying to do because we realize that our judiciary is a crucial arm of our government and our governance as a people. And so let's try and beef it up.
If the judiciary was playing ball in the fight against corruption, there would be money for them. That
the judiciary is playing ball.
They're not.
People are in
they
court.
keep ruling on
it
cases.
Was very clear
no convictions.
They had no convictions. They were actually trying to alter or amend certain things. There's very many cases where you find that they could not go further because they could not include certain kinds of evidence, and it stopped there.
Yes, because the law, because of what the law says. You see, if the law says that you cannot admit some flimsy recording just because you recorded somebody on the phone.
The judges could interpret it. The judges have the scope to interpret the law to anybody's advantage.
But the point is, why are we...
And in this case, they seem to be protecting the likes of Kidero. Who knows? Maybe that's where they're getting their money.
Why are we doing a 50% cut right now? Is this the thing of official revisits?
Are they the only arm of government that is experiencing the cut?
That has received a 50% cut?
It's not 50%.
They're shouting because they've never touched... They've shouted because they've never touched them like that before.
It's 3 billion from 14 billion. It should have been 50%.
The judiciary is always touched.
In this case,
Eric is not giving the whole picture. You can't have a situation that, and he's trying to tell us that only one department of government is being touched. It's not true. These cuts affect everybody.
Yes.
And you are failing to also bring up a very important point here. If we've had all these reforms over all these years, why do we still have these backlogs?
We've reduced
No.
Do we have the same backlog? You see, backlog does not mean that because you've increased it depletes immediately. So we've been reducing the backlog.
How long have these changes been in place, Eric?
Since Justice Mutunga came in.
Mutunga, not even Maraga. So that's what, like 10 years plus?
Just about 9.
Oh, right. Sorry, 9, not
just
10.
7 billion.
My bad.
Just 9.
Just about 9 years, yes.
Okay.
How many backlog cases did we have before that? What are the initiatives that the judiciary has taken to clear those backlogs?
They've built new courts.
Now we have this because of what the National Treasury has been doing. Because the National Treasury has sat and watched as the money that they are supposed to be protecting, the money that they're supposed to be utilizing well, because they've let it go. Now they come and say, no.
Eric, just because they've seen that they've let it go doesn't mean they should stop it now.
What you guys are doing is you're focusing at the end. Let's focus from the very beginning. And the beginning is the National Treasury.
We have news for you. We are not going to focus the way you want us to focus. Sorry.
If maybe they'd ruled in line with human rights law, with things like on the homosexuality case and things like that, then I'd have some sympathy for the judiciary. But they've been involved in very unconstitutional rulings, and for me, it's not somebody I feel sorry for, because you remember the ruling on homosexuality as to whether it should be decriminalized. No. It didn't go according to the Constitution. It didn't go according to human rights.
Eric, there are things
and then they're protecting
the law is the law.
And then they're busy protecting
the Constitution is the Constitution.
They're protecting corrupt politicians, but here you are. There's a group of people wanting their rights to be acknowledged as humans, and the judiciary doesn't grant them that. But you're busy protecting the likes of Kidero.
Those rights are protected under the Constitution.
Absolutely.
So it's not, you're not doing them a favor.
So you see, the judges can interpret the law how they like, and what they've been doing in the past is listening to these corrupt individuals who have a lot of money, and I'm guessing, I have a mild suspicion that they might have paid them.
Crystal ball speaking.
Crystal ball, yeah, so this is my indemnity. I can say anything. I'm guessing that these corrupt individuals would have paid these judges to make these decisions, and this is why I say I have no faith, no trust and confidence
and
in the
even
judiciary.
No sympathy, and when
none
you look
whatsoever.
At it like this, at this case,
Listening
where
to
they're
you,
now
it's
up
like
in
you're saying,
arms
let's
and
just
saying that they
collapse this
so
judiciary
suddenly
thing.
now they're saying
No. Forget about
suddenly
it.
now
It's
they're
called
saying they
calling
cannot
them out.
yeah
So what
they're
should we
suddenly
do?
saying they can't do their job because 50% of their budget has been taken away from them. What about people who have had to within the same country have had to stay with less than even 50%
You know
of
who
what
we need
should
to
have
call?
been
Because
allocated
they're not
to
working.
them,
Let's
and they didn't
call
do
that
their job.
Samuel fella. What's his name? From Karen. James.
James. Tell them tough.
I mean,
Move on.
Man up.
yeah, they should man up. What are they talking
0719
about?
012 0719 012 The conversation that I was raising, which has now been hijacked and has been turned into something else, was looking at the National Treasury and how it has been managing our money and our finances as a country. So we are at a point where, as a country, we have budget cuts, austerity measures, because the National Treasury feels that, we don't have money. Suddenly, we don't have
It's
money.
not that they
So
feel
no,
no,
they actually don't
there's
have
no
it.
money.
There.
Money not day.
Listen,
There's
we
no
need to
money.
raise
It's not
money,
about
and they
feeling.
say it's a two-pronged approach. It's cost
Maybe
saving.
we do have money, but the National
No.
Treasury just doesn't feel it.
No.
Because we are raising money. We have been raising money. This is an economy that's growing at 5.6% this year, according to the World Bank. This economy is growing, but the National Treasury tells us
We should be on
we don't have
double-digit
money.
growth.
Are you
We are
not the
actually
one
now
we told?
cutting back
Are
our
you not
budget.
the one we told in the morning today that yes, they said it's growing, numbers are increasing, but people don't have food?
They're not
What are you
feeling
talking
it.
about?
Things
They're
on
not-
the ground
they're not
are
feeling
Things
it.
on the ground are different, my friend.
So they're not. People are not feeling it.
No.
The National Treasury is feeling like there's no money.
They're throwing a tantrum.
Eric, allow us to just put forward this argument. If they want so many complaints from the common Mwananchi against the judiciary, one might actually feel sympathy. They are not felt on the ground. This is the problem.
Who?
The judiciary. The moment you have cases against judges, cases against people who are supposed to be custodians of this very law, judicial misconduct, all sorts of things, unfortunately, people will feel, wait, we are not very safe under these people.
Under these people.
Yes. So when it comes along, the same argument they've used against the police. You may call it a few bad apples, but so be it. They're representative. Then you have cases where the funding is cut. I can't relate to 14 billion shillings. Then you tell me the 3 billion shilling cut. It's 14 minus 3.
Finish.
Yes, just 14, but you still have 11. So what's the big deal? And the fact that you asked for 32 or you asked for 50, that's what you wanted for. But in the way governments work, you do need to show what you've done with what you've been given before. It's not really very complicated. The judiciary, in all honesty, haven't done a very good job of that. They have put up courts. Yes, we've had situations where we've heard that cases have been fast-forwarded. We have. But that's not what we put them there for. We put them to end backlogs. So that we're not discussing backlogs. We put them there so that cases are expedited.
To help fight corruption.
The things we're talking about, we put them there so that these things would not be a point of discussion. They're still a point of discussion. So no sympathy there. Sorry.
Zero.
Do you know they should incentivize? This is my solution. They should incentivize the judiciary on corruption cases. That you guys need a budget. You get your budget from these corruption cases by
You raise your own
by
money.
getting back. Yeah,
Getting back the money that was stolen from Kenya.
you get back the assets.
Raise your own money.
You'll see they wouldn't be taking Kidero's money and giving him orders.
Let me
to
open up the
stop
phone lines.
investigating
Let me
his
open up
accounts.
the phone lines. Now let's talk about their confidence in the judiciary. 0719-012-600. 0719-012-600. And also, of course, you're commenting on Facebook via Spice FM KER page and our hashtag on Twitter, hashtag the Situation Room. So 0719-012-600. The confidence in the judiciary. So the judiciary has received a 50% budget cut. It's 3 billion shillings in terms of operations. Of course, the rest is going into salaries and other stuff that is, not for development and operations. So 3 billion shillings, and immediate impact of that is 15,000 cases have been suspended indefinitely because judges are not able to move, or the operations are not able to make sure that these cases are hard and determined. And I was saying it's the National Treasury that we should be focusing on, but my colleagues here are saying we should focus on the judiciary for today, and then tomorrow we can come to
They're the ones who are shouting.
the National Treasury. So, callers, and let's hear about this. It's 9:45.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
So 0719-012-600. I have Matthew from Nakuru. Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Unfortunately, this is a bit hilarious, and someone would want to say that they've no money. They've been sitting. I don't know where money and sitting down. They are talking about. They wanted to say that they wanted to get rid of the backlog. So they wanted to increase their hours so that these cases would be dealt with. Now, in the same breath, they are saying that they don't have money to sit down and sort out these cases. Hapa ndio tunasema Wakenya wanabebwa ujinga. Because really, these people were operating on a budget before. So at what point what criteria did they use to increase this budget that they've now decreased again? Here is a situation whereby mwizi wa kuku anafungwa miaka 20 na. And this is someone who, for instance, was taking this chicken just to go feed their family.
True.
Yeah, but mtu mwenye ameiba billions and billions, unasikia Kidero inasemekana kesi za Kidero account zake zisinvestigatiwe. Why?
Or a rapist is given 10 years.
A rapist is given 10 years, something like that. And they're even asking now for those years to be reduced. Do you see the problem?
It's a situation whereby wamewekwa mfuko.
Absolutely.
Wamewekwa mfuko.
Sasa kwa hiyo mfuko, lakini Matthew, kwa hiyo mfuko ni sawa wamewekwa kwa mfuko. But now here you've been allocated money and then that money is taken away from you. And this is money for operations.
Wakule zile ziko kwa mfuko.
So that's why they're taking a break.
Use the one that you have.
That is what they need to facilitate to sit down and sort out these cases. Because surely, look at that person who, for instance, is in remand. Maybe because there are people who are right now are in remand and they are not even guilty of whatever they've been accused of. So what happens to that person? They continue languishing in remand. Yet someone who stole billions of shillings
is walking around,
released on bond, is walking around free.
No, our money hasn't been recovered. Thank you very much, Matthew.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matthew.
The rest of your day.
Thank you, you too. He gets it, doesn't he, Matthew?
012-600, yes.
Oh, he gets it
very well. Yes.
He raises a valid point. Whether he gets it or not is something. He raises a valid point here. But
I wonder if his sentiments sort of is reflective across society in terms of trust and confidence in the judiciary, because he gave a very good example there. You have a petty theft of chicken or what have you, and I guess it would go down as armed robbery. He probably had a knife with him for him to get 20 years or life, whatever it was.
And then armed robbery for a chicken.
He might have had a penknife.
He was threatening.
As in, it could have been translated.
He was threatening the chicken with a knife.
No. It could have been a situation where he had a penknife on him, and it would have been interpreted to be armed robbery.
Got it right. I understand.
Since we're going to be facetious, why don't we say he also had a spoon?
No, this is exactly what happened. This is a true story, CT.
It does happen.
This
Robbery
is a
with
true
violence.
story.
In this case,
robbery, yes, robbery with violence, because he had a penknife.
Yes.
Now he goes to jail for 20 years or for life. And then you have a fellow who's been siphoning funds off the Nairobi County in the previous administration, and we're not even allowed to look at his accounts. And this was a public figure. And this is all down to, judicial sort of sayings. It's them who've decided all these things. So you can see that the sympathy for the judiciary, it's just not there.
I'm picking up calls on 0719-012-600. There's something that you wanted to say, Indu, before I think we interrupted you.
No, I was going to say that. I mean, it's very clear that, especially when we're looking at the backlog that they've been talking about, when these budget cuts were made, is suddenly when there was a backlog, 15,000, all of a sudden, boom, those cases, where did they come from? That means that you were not doing what you should have been doing anyway.
Eric, you asked the question.
Anyway.
Why don't you spend this 14 million and then tell us, billion, sorry.
Yes, we've spent it.
14 billion.
Yes.
We now have no more money.
Now,
but we've cleared this many cases.
11 billion, yes, that 11 billion that is left, we have now used it.
Yes.
Okay?
We don't
and
have.
now we have these 10,000 cases and
yes.
we cannot go forward. Help us.
Plus.
Then we can see. It
That
is
we
very
understand.
clear. But now, you've not used the money that they gave you. You're complaining that they've cut it. Then you're telling us there are 15,000 cases. And you're not. And then on top of that, you still refuse to come to work. Have you lost it?
We established these divisions. We established these divisions so we can
actually,
expedite
Matthew
cases
got it
and
right.
hearing.
It's hilarious. It's actually comedic.
We established these divisions so we can expedite hearing of these cases. Now, these divisions are being funded by this extra cash, the 3 billion shillings. Now, you remove the 3 billion shillings to fund these particular divisions of the court. What happens to those divisions?
No, there's no way that National Treasury. I'm sorry, CT.
Used every day
There is no
in
way
day.
because first of all,
to
number
establish
one,
those
National
divisions,
they're not
you build a
idiots.
property. Once
Yes.
you've built it, you don't need the same budget as you did last year.
Now you're finishing.
Other than salaries, then they need to take a salary cut.
Let's be honest. By the time those budget cuts are being done, National Treasury does not come in and say, "Oh, okay, you need 3 billion
This
for your
National Treasury?
No, hold on, for your operations. We're gonna take it all away." There's no
This
way.
National Treasury
You've been left with
in
something,
fact,
and that's what we're saying. You've been left with something. Oh yeah, use that something. Let
Oh,
us
yeah.
see that it has finished.
Now, wow.
Let us see that it has finished, and then we will look at it from there. But you don't even say, even the one that you've given us, we're not going to use it. We're not going to sit because you have removed half.
No,
Come
we're,
on.
we're letting that happen. Okay, the other
Then
cases
you
must
refuse to
continue.
sit.
The other
What is
cases
going to
must
happen?
continue, and that's why the other cases are going on. Seji, what are you saying?
I'm saying, this money, this discussion we're having, it's like against a backdrop of this understanding, which is completely spurious, that the money will be used in one day. This is over a period of time.
Yeah.
I mean,
You're being super practical here. I don't think they want that. That's very pragmatic.
But what I'm trying to say, are you telling me that the court system in this country uses 1 billion shillings every day? Well, even if they did, work for 14 days.
Yeah, then say we have used the money and it's finished.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I think by virtue of their profession, the judiciary does have quite a bit of respect, used to in terms of from society. They were viewed as upstanding members of society, having risen up the ranks of the legal system here. And as a result, they don't get the sort of backlash that they deserve because also they don't have much interaction with the general public. So it's not like the legislature who have their electorate that they're answerable to. It's not like the executive arm of government where you have the police that we're dealing with. With the judges, we always see a sort of very respectable looking. Sorry, there's a call coming in.
Yes, we have Jack calling in from Mombasa. Good morning, Jack.
Good morning, gentlemen, ladies. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning, Jack.
Yes, I want to contribute something, just a comment on the judiciary.
Mm-hmm.
Now, looking at the scenario we find ourselves in, where the judiciary, for lack of better word, appears to be like going on strike,
Mm-hmm.
you realize there's an element of either the judiciary sabotaging the national government or trying to communicate something is not happening. For instance, if you look at it this way, you presented a budget to the national government. It is upon the national government and the parliament to look at the budget request and either approve. They may reduce the amount. And this does not necessarily mean you have to draw tantrums.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Judiciary is a big organ of the government. It's an organ.
It's a third of the government.
Third of the government.
Yes. Now, if you see the judiciary behaving that way, where are we like Kenyans? Where do we find ourselves? It's like a scenario where we all run to the judiciary when we have problems. I can only liken this to when you find your father crying. What do? We as ordinary Kenyans look up to the judiciary for our problems, for interpretation of the law, and so on. But now you find them at a situation whereby they're saying we are not able to continue. I would argue, like somebody said, that we would tell them the money you are able to recover in terms of stolen money fraudulently, it will sound absurd, but you can tell them in a year, if we look at how much
10%
money
commission.
you've been able, yes, and then we should be able to see whether the figures are working out. You've recovered 10 billion.
Did you get a billion?
Yes.
For them to get their 3 billion back, they'd have to recover 30 billion.
Yes, it may sound absurd, but
No, it's
it
not
may
absurd at
actually
all.
not.
Absurd.
How
Yeah,
do you,
that is what I'm saying. But as Kenyans, it's a sad state of
It
affairs.
is.
Yeah.
It is.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Jack.
thank you very much.
Asante sana.
Thank you, Jack.
You're saying judiciary is a third of the government, right?
It is in terms of the separation of
In a
powers.
three,
and you have
in a 3
three
trillion
arms.
in a 3 trillion budget, you're giving a third of your government 11
No,
billion.
no. It's not that simplistic.
How does
I
it
mean,
work
in
like
terms
that?
of the way the power is divided, it doesn't
yes,
have
but
half
also
as
in
many
terms of-
personnel as sort of the executive, which would have the interior security, police, army. What you can't
has-
compare it.
the
The judiciary employs
has-
how many compared
it
to the
has
government?
more staff
If it's-
than the legislature. It should basically have even more staff than the legislature, right? And if
I'm not agreeing with you. I'm listening.
but if you look at how much then the legislature is getting and how much budget cuts are we getting from the legislature, I think this is a thing of let's revisit. We are going through a
This is
revisiting.
the
This is the
revisitation.
revisiting that is actually happening. CT, yes.
you see the issue of impunity that we keep discussing, we've always left the judiciary out of it, and now they have brought it into the discussion. Because they seem to be telling us that they should just get what they want.
Exactly. They can throw and be selfish and throw a temper tantrum if they didn't get what they want, and they say, "Oh, okay, well, we didn't get what we want. We're not going to work." Now you can imagine if everybody across the country did that.
Close.
If everybody across the country had that same kind of attitude, where would we be? With what you have, do the best that you can. We cannot ask that of other citizens across the country. And then this special group of people named the judiciary, we cannot demand that from them. Come on. In all things, we need to get real and
Jerry?
have these conversations and change our mindset.
Jerry?
Yes, I think a percentage of the judiciary's budget should actually be pegged on how much they collect back from corruption. That way we see that they're working, especially with these cases for corruption. It should be 10% commission for what they collect, and that 50% of their budget comes from whatever they've managed to recover from stolen assets.
CT?
Yes, let the discussion continue.
I think we should actually look at the judiciary as a very crucial part, as an essential part of our society, and we shouldn't be doing such budget cuts. The Treasury should answer for this. Why are we getting to a point where we need to have budget cuts, and yet you just gave us a budget just the other day? In fact, it's less than 6 months old, really, and we're cutting down this budget? Come on, you guys, get
Cost
serious.
saving.
0719-01261 is the number you've been calling. Thank you very much, and also join us tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. for another 4 hours of mature, intelligent conversation. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. Have a good day. It's 10 o'clock.